Chapter 1050. The girl's face revealed an expression of boundless joy. This was not an act but a genuine expression of joy. Looking at the girl's eyes that were filled with confusion, uneasiness and fear, turned into the current peace and hope, Duke wondered if he had really fallen, turning his head and accepting a gift. "What's your name?" Duke asked. Unexpectedly, the girl did not answer him. Instead, she took 2 steps back and knelt down. "Master, please bestow me a name." "I'm asking you what's your name?" Duke was a little embarrassed. "No one treats me as a high elf anymore. My old name has already lost its meaning. So please bestow me a name, master." Duke asked a few times, but the girl still refused to answer. Duke was also discouraged. He could not bring anyone from this era with him, so he thought to himself, alright, I'll just leave her with Tyrant later. After all, everything I'm doing now is just a temporary measure to numb the enemy. "Celia." "Yes, from now on you'll be called Celia Ubatilia." Duke's bad taste kicked in. The girl happily accepted. She placed her hands on her shoulders and bowed to Duke. "From now on I'm only yours, Celia Ubatilia. Come here." "Yes." The shadowy Duke stretched out a black finger and gently slid it down from Celia's shoulder. As the girl trembled slightly, his fingertips slid across her collarbone through the canyon and landed near her navel. Even though she was embarrassed, the girl still quietly endured the slight uneasiness and fear in her heart. I didn't expect your aptitude to be top-notch." To be honest, Duke was quite surprised. He had thought that Queen Azhara would throw a sugar-coated bullet at him, and that she would at most be a charming vase. But upon inspection he realized that this was a completely undeveloped piece of virgin land. Don't get the wrong idea. He was talking about the aptitude of the girl now called Celia. Although she was not very powerful now, her bones, muscles and magic circuits that had yet to fully take shape all had top-notch potential. It was only a matter of time before she entered the realm of heroes. The rarest thing was that, like most of the moon guards, she cultivated both magic and martial arts. He leaned towards agility, but deep down he was still an intelligent hero. Who is she? Another tragic character who was buried in the long river of history, unable to become a hero? Duque sighed in his heart. Speaking of which, the ancient era was also an era where heroes came forth in large numbers. Think about it, Doraima Sunstrider, who founded the Kuel Salis kingdom, was now an unremarkable existence among the elven nobles. His awkward radiant moon strife left him in a dilemma. Celia, who was praised by Duque, was slightly happy, but she didn't dare to be arrogant. "Master, please take pity on me." "Pity? As long as you pay your eternal loyalty to me, I will." Duque stood up and allowed her to follow behind him. "I'm not interested today. Take care of Tyrant first." Celia's eyes flashed with unwillingness. She was sent by the Empress. Who would have thought that she would have to serve a captive, a slave-like existence? However, she adjusted her attitude very well. She was already dead in the past. Now she had to hold on to Duque's thigh tightly. When Duque returned to his side palace, Tyrant was furious. She cursed in her heart, "Du Kong, you bastard. You just took me last night and now you're going out for a change." She knew that she didn't love this man, but she couldn't help but get angry. Du Kong had been implicated. Last night, during the intense battle, Duque had followed history and called himself Du Kong to Tyrant. And now, unbeknownst to Du Kong had been implicated. Whoosh. Weinzig Du's coffin couldn't hold on any longer. Duque had no idea, master of the infernal tunnel, she is. Tyrant pretended to be calm as she asked. "Celia, the dancer that Queen Azhara gave me. However, she's now my maid. From today onwards she will serve you." Celia came up and bowed respectfully. Tyrant's eyes twitched and she felt a sense of relief. Seems like this bastard still cares about my feelings. Tyrant, endure. You have to endure. All of this was a personal sacrifice for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion. As long as they could destroy those demons, they would be able to avenge their comrades. Furthermore, this was something that even Elune had agreed to. This was the will of the goddess. A woman's thoughts were very subtle. In a situation like this, Tyrant unconsciously treated Duque as her greatest support. At the same time, her righteousness drove her to do all sorts of things that she didn't want to do. This was especially so when Duque brought back an elven girl who was as beautiful as her. This made Tyrant feel even more threatened. After a night of interaction, she had a deep understanding of the two sides of Duque. At this moment, Duque's will was undoubtedly good. However, in order to hide in the Burning Legion, he had no choice but to keep a large amount of dark energy in his body. Even if this was for the sake of a noble goal, she found that the darkness was still quietly devouring Duque's soul. This was a very bad sign. If Duque really fell, she would also be consigned to eternal damnation. What was more terrifying was that it could lead to the destruction of the world of Azeroth. Glancing at the elven girl called Celia, Tyrant shyly approached Duque and whispered into his ear, "I will try to like you during this period of time. Bastard." Duque smiled bitterly. Of course, during this period of time, was referring to the Burning Legion's destruction. Fine, you can do whatever you want. A pure white dress wrapped around Tyrant's well-built and voluptuous body. She did not twist her waist or strut around in a lotus position. Just the way Tyrant walked naturally to the center of the palace gave off a strange sense of holiness. She gently took off her boots, revealing a pair of long legs that could easily rival most human women in seconds before Duque's eyes. In the next moment, the solemn priestess aura disappeared. What was left was a never-before-seen charm that only a mature woman could have. It was a strange scene. Without any accompaniment, Tyrant danced elegantly and gracefully, her body moving up and down. She displayed her energy and passion to her heart's content, but the way she looked at Duke was incomparably complicated. Resentment, faint hatred, and a hint of submission. Unknowingly, the song ended. Duque had already carried Tyrant to the sofa and started groping her to his heart's content. Tyrant had no choice but to give in. She closed her eyes but did not resist Duke's advances. At this moment, Gemini's voice suddenly came from the entrance of the palace. "Oh, infernal emissary, let me introduce you to a strong Kaldorii who has joined the army, Illidan's Storm Rage." When Tyrant's eyes met the familiar amber eyes, Tyrant felt as if the world was ending. Chapter 1051. Time seemed to have stopped. At that moment, Tyrant could no longer be described as sexy or seductive. On that priestess' face, there was confusion and pain, but the redness was the main theme. Tyrant gave in and allowed Duke to do as he pleased. Everyone could see the two black claws digging deep into her white dress from the entrance of the hall. This beautiful face that seemed to have sunk into depravity was simply captivating at this moment. It was so captivating that one wouldn't even want their own life. Of course, this was only for neutral males. For Illidan, who was deeply in love with Tyrant, this was like a bolt from the blue. All kinds of scenes from when he was young to now, the little things that happened unknowingly, and the warm and ambiguous scenes all appeared in front of him. Idiot. My future partner will definitely be an indomitable hero. Humph. I'm ignoring you. Fragments of Tyrant's voice from thousands of years ago rang in his ears. The words of a child, a teenager, and a young man rang in Illidan's ears. In his trance, he even had the illusion that it was deafening. The shocking scene in front of him made him dizzy and he could not open his eyes. What made him collapse the most was that he saw his own image on this human-shaped demon that was filled with dark energy. It was as if he saw himself, Illidan's Storm Rage, who was enjoying his beloved Tyrant, and not the high-tier Void Lord Infernal Lord that the twins of Eredar had introduced to him with a wicked smile. For a moment he almost wanted to pull out the two war blades of Azeroth on his back and kill this bastard who dared to defile the goddess of his heart. He really wanted to. He really wanted to. Fury erupted from the depths of his soul like a volcanic eruption. In an instant, it filled his limbs and bones, seeping into every blood vessel and every cell. He wanted to explode. The anger in his chest swelled to the point of explosion, and he was on the verge of exploding. On the other side, seeing the change in Illidan's expression, Duque knew that things were going to go south. In the original history, it was Illidan who sacrificed himself and pretended to defect to the enemy in exchange for that rare opportunity. That scene definitely did not include Tyrant being robbed. Perhaps he had prepared himself mentally before coming here, or perhaps he was prepared to sell himself in exchange for Tyrant, who should still be under the protection of Elune. According to the script of history, with Sardra's appreciation, he might really be able to do it. Unfortunately, everything was a mess. Because of Duque's transmigration and the arrival of Gemini. For Illidan, the test was more than twice as difficult. The system elf clearly marked that killed Jaden's will had quietly arrived. He attached a very faint trace of his divine sense to auras and observed the side hall. Not only was he observing Illidan, but he was also observing Duque. Jaden thought that he had done it very secretly, but he could not escape the soul scan of the system elf. Duque knew that the biggest test had come. As long as he passed this test, he would be able to completely control the portal and work with Illidan to destroy the Burning Legion. If he couldn't pass, everything would be over. Suddenly he couldn't help but laugh bitterly in his heart. Spying really wasn't that fun. Since ancient times, many undercover police officers had lost themselves after completing their undercover mission. Years of being behind the enemy lines had completely changed their habits. Other than waking up every morning and telling themselves, "I'm a soldier, not a thief," there was no one who could help them. In fact, after completing their mission, most undercover officers ended up in a miserable state. Being undercover for years was a small matter. Many of them were forced to become addicted to drugs. Even if they quit, they could no longer be police officers. The bitterness of being undercover. Who knew? Who knew? Duque looked up 90 degrees to the sky in his heart, and 2 streams of crocodile tears flowed down. Faster, thief. Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame that bastard Nozdormu. He could have just thrown me into the Grey Valley in the future. I will definitely do my best to wave the flag and cheer for everyone in every battle. I will be the most outstanding hooligan and survive the ancient war. But he threw me into the twisting nether and almost killed me. I was just trying to protect myself. Yes. It's the demons who forced me. It's the goddess of fate who teased us. It's this shameless world that didn't give me a way out. At this moment, even Duque had no choice but to give up. Tyron was thin-skinned after all. Her first reaction was to escape from reality. She couldn't accept that she had just decided to cooperate with Du Kong, and immediately her despicable behavior was seen by her childhood sweetheart who loved her deeply. It was a blasphemy against her hazy love. It was the collapse of her entire world. She screamed, "Don't look at me." She turned her head and struggled to get up from Duque's body. Duque made a decision. "You don't deserve to look at my woman." How domineering. Come on. Duque directly used his ultimate skill. Mind Blast, that was 100 times stronger than before, was instantly released. The invisible, formless and powerful psychic attack crossed 10 meters and landed on Illidan's body. Illidan, who had never seen such a strange attack, was caught off guard. His agility did not help him, and the instincts that he had trained for thousands of years did not help him. His strong, steel-like body was sent flying just like that. Crackle. He miserably rolled on the ground a dozen times before his dust-covered body stopped in the deep ravine he had created. Logically speaking, as an agility-type hero, he shouldn't be so weak. But Mind Blast was never a simple dark element attack. Illidan saw every moment of his life in this spiritual illusion, from when he was born to when he died of old age. If it wasn't for the fact that the image in the illusion was exactly the same as when his body was twisted, he might have been a little more spirited. He used all his strength to try to prevent his world, mainly the real world, from falling into a state of chaos. But that was all. He wanted to get up and scream to the sky to express his pain and depression. But at this moment he finally came to his senses and remembered his mission. Yes. I came here to pretend to join them and then find a way to destroy the entire Burning Legion. Wasn't I already mentally prepared to endure everything? Why did I lose my composure when I saw Tyrant? I had to take back Tyrant. I had to endure for the future of my people. Illidan bit his lips until they bled, but he pretended to vomit blood. He knelt on the ground and shouted, "I'm so sorry. Great Lord Infernal Affairs. I shouldn't have peeked at your belongings. Please give me the heaviest punishment." Chapter 1052. The situation in front of him gave Duque a headache. He was terrified. Although he knew that Illidan was pretending, Illidan was still terrified. This was something that countless players could not do back then. He deserved to die and he was unrepentant. This was the impression that most old players had of Illidan. Perhaps in the later versions, Illidan would be cleared. But until Duque transmigrated, Illidan was that miserable, pitiful and hateful guy. Regardless of whether he was redeemed in the later versions, one thing was for sure. In the end he never got Tyrant. Mysticism could not save the innocent, and money could not change one's fate. This was the case for black people like Illidan. Even mysticism could not save this African chief. Even if he went to the goddess of fate to buy money, he could not take away any of the cups and cutlery on his bitter coffee table of fate. So after thinking for a while, Duque decided to let Illidan be black all the way. Tyrant, whose power was sealed, did not have much strength. Although she struggled hard, Duque still grabbed her slender and flexible waist tightly, displaying the aura that an evil Void Lord should have. The surrounding air was quickly dyed black, and the surging and overbearing dark power instantly became the only main melody within a radius of a few hundred meters. Duque's power was so amazing that not only Illidan, but even the Eridar twins beside Duque were a little surprised. Huh. You're Illidan, right? Deaf-like tyrant? Duque's lips curled into an extremely evil sneer. It was a sneer that would kill at the slightest disagreement. It was a sneer that looked down on all things in the gods. Illidan had killed 2 demon lords before, but he had never seen such an unfathomable and terrifying existence like Duque. Under this terrifying pressure that had materialized, bean-sized beads of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Tyrant, who was tightly held by Duque, was also frightened and did not dare to move anymore. She was afraid. It wasn't an act, it was real fear. She naturally knew about Duque's grand plan, but no one had promised her that for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion, they would not crush those who stood in the way of this grand plan, even if these were the childhood friends she valued the most. In order to save this world, both she and the moon goddess Elun were doing their best. Even if she prayed to Elun, Elun would definitely not support her and ruin this great plan of destruction in order to protect her childhood sweetheart. Tyrant felt as if she had fallen into an icy abyss. No. Infernal affairs. I beg you, don't hurt Illidan. He's my childhood friend. So, he didn't mean to offend you, he's already kneeling. Tyrant trembled. Duque didn't want to be such an evil person. The problem was that killed Jaden was watching. If they jumped back to the loyal ministers now, not only would they all be finished, they wouldn't even be able to escape. In fact, he was crying in his heart. On the surface, Best Actor Duque's gaze was sharp. Oh, that's good. Didn't you swear to give your all to me? Prove it to me. Show him. This time, Tyrant felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She looked at Illidan one last time and accepted her fate in despair. I'm doing this to save Kaldorii, save Azeroth. Forgive me, Illidan. Watching Tyrant slowly offer her lips and allow the black figure to desecrate her body, Illidan's face was full of bitterness. His mouth tasted like sh*t. He didn't know why things had turned out this way, but the grievance and anger in his heart almost burned his brain. In the end, Illidan could only deeply bow his head. Duque was also very annoyed. For the first time in his life he had become a great evil person. Even when he was unwilling, he wished that director Nozdormu would suddenly jump out and yell for the camera to stop. Hey, what happened to the cut? What happened to the reshoot? Nozdormu, come out and die. I'm not going to act anymore. Duque had tears in his heart, but he had no choice but to continue acting. As if savoring the sweetness on his lips, he smacked his lips and laughed maniacally. Ha! Do you see this? Illidan's storm rage. This is power. Only power is everything. As long as you have power, you can obtain anything you want. For example, women. For example, reputation. For example, conquest. So what if you're not satisfied? So what if you're angry? You want your lover back? You can beat me first. I don't dare. I don't dare. Illidan deeply bowed his head. Haha. You don't dare? You just don't dare to say it out loud, right? Duque laughed coldly. I really don't dare. Illidan's head was even lower, completely sticking to the rubble on the ground. His forehead hurt from laughing so hard that it hurt. Suddenly all the pressure vanished into thin air. The cold smile on Duque's face did not change. It doesn't matter. In the face of absolute power, all lies and disobedience are just fleeting clouds. I don't care if you're sincerely convinced or not. I'll still say the same thing. If you have the power, take it yourself. If you don't, then kneel down and lick my boots. Maybe when I'm in a good mood and tired of playing with your tyrant, I'll give it to you. Illidan's body trembled. Was it shock? Anger? No one knew. Maybe it was both. At this time, Duque looked at the Eridar twins who had been watching the show. Enough of you. Don't try to test me in the future. I'm not as good-tempered as you think I am. Yes, sorry. The twins laughed sinisterly. Duque said, "Since he claimed to be here to join the queen and serve our leader, then let's report this to His Majesty. Then let's report it to His Majesty Sargeras. Maybe His Majesty will like it. After all, he's the first person on this planet to join our side after the war." The twins nodded. Duque could clearly feel Illidan's resentment, but he didn't care. As long as Illidan could get the demon's soul, he didn't care if Illidan lived or died. Duque really didn't want to care about what would happen in 10,000 years. As long as he crippled the Burning Legion, he didn't care if there was another Illidan in 10,000 years. "You've angered me. Believe it or not, I'll really join the Burning Legion." With that, Duque brought Tyron back to the side hall. When Silegia obediently closed the door for Duque, Duque's actions suddenly became rough. "No. What are you doing?" "Kill." Jaden was watching them from afar. Tyron knew that. She also knew her mission, but her feelings were still rejecting Duque. The next moment she was shocked to see the darkness in Duque's eyes. It was obvious that if she continued to resist, the darkness might really devour Duque's rationality. Tyron finally realized the danger. If she continued to provoke Duque's negative emotions, perhaps Duque would become a Void Lord before they could complete their plan. Sigh. Tyron sighed softly. She used herself as a sacrifice and quietly devoured all the sharpness of Duque's godly sword. Chapter 1053. Tyrant Whisperwind was jolted awake from her nightmare. She had forgotten most of what had happened in the dream. What she could remember was that the moon goddess Elun had been embroiled in a terrible war. Her mount had been fatally wounded and flung her off its body. Her head had hit the ground heavily. Then she had been captured by that terrifying Savis. She could still remember some terrifying scenes and sounds. A monster that looked like a goat had been eyeing her menacingly. A pair of furry hands with sharp claws had been grabbing onto her tightly. Then she had woken up in shock. That pair of narrow and elegant silver eyes swept around the gorgeous side hall. She had seen this gorgeous room where she had been placed under house arrest countless times. The afternoon sun shone in from the west. This was supposed to be the elves' resting time. Her soft lips parted slightly, and she let out a soft sigh, lamenting her current situation. She shook her head. Her dark blue hair fluttered like waves, and a few strands of silver hair were rather conspicuous at this moment. She propped herself up from her prone position, and the silky blanket slid down her body. Suddenly seeing the battle scars on her beautiful body, she could not help but blush. She really wanted to ignore the black figure beside her, but unfortunately, the man who was sleeping soundly in the shadow state was her true master. This man who called himself Du Kong had always shown her the Burning Legion's battle reports without a care in the world. He had even publicly announced to the Eridar twins that this was part of his training to break her willpower. Tyrant wanted to deny that these battle reports were true, but the few times she tried to contact Elun under Du Kang's watch, she was met with silence. All Elun could give her was meaningless consolation and urging her to carry out her plan. Du Kong had even tried to contact Malfurion's soul, which had always been blocked. In the end, Malfurion had also made her believe in Du Kong. Tyrant was afraid that she would not be able to hold on any longer. She did not know when the so-called plan would succeed. She only knew that she was sinking step by step, even if it was in the name of justice and righteousness. The beautiful memories of her childhood and teenage years were fading away, and the members of the Elun sisterhood were beginning to fade from her mind. Her entire spiritual world was filled with this man's endless tricks and schemes. She had fought, cried, and begged for forgiveness. What scared her the most was that she was starting to get used to this role that she once thought was terrible. Even if she was tormented miserably, her mind would still be filled with that black figure when she turned around. If he left for a while, she would quickly miss him and look forward to his next visit. Unknowingly, 30 days had passed. Tyron was shocked to discover that the luckiest thing between a man and a woman was to have the person you loved love you, while the luckier thing was to have someone who loved you but you did not love him. But now she had fallen into a third way that she thought she would never accept: getting used to each other. In just a month she had completely gotten used to his presence. It was as if she was eating and drinking. Have I fallen? Tyrant held her face in her hands. Suddenly Duque's voice was heard. No. This was just a nightmare. The dream will eventually wake up. However, whether what is unfolding before your eyes is a return to the ordinary daily life, or a reality that is even crueler than a nightmare, depends on our efforts. Tyrant felt a sudden surge of warmth. How ironic. Just as she was about to break down and become a toy without any sense of self, it was the fellow who had been forcing her that pulled her back. Tyrant bit her lip hard. She could not help but let her imagination run wild. If he really used this method to save the Kado race, how should I face him in the future? Bringing Tyrant with him, Duque walked towards the southernmost tower of Azhara's palace. The tower shone with the light of magical energy. Thanks to Duque's perfect adjustments, the high elves did not have to work day and night like they did in history. Along the way, Tyrant saw the high elves and the evil long-horned monsters taking turns to salute them on the way to the tower. The high elves wore green hooded robes embroidered with intricate patterns, while the monsters' lower bodies resembled the bodies of goats. They used to be night elves, but now they belonged to the Burning Legion. Yes, they were satyrs. In the huge hall at the top of the tower, the satyrs and the high elves struggled to maintain the magic within the hexagon formation. On top of the complicated magic formation that Duque had personally engraved, a ball of flame floated in the air. There was a ball of flame floating in midair. In the middle of the flame was a black hole. This black hole seemed to never disappear. The moment Duque brought Tyrant into the hall, she knew that she had entered the territory of the leader of the Burning Legion, Sardras. There, the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, and Eridar Gemini had already arrived. Be it the Apocalypse guards around the hall, they all looked at the white-robed Tyrant with mocking eyes. These mocking gazes made Tyrant feel ashamed. The Gemini even gave Duque a thumbs up. Thanks to Duque's extremely pure spatial magic, Sardras no longer had to forcefully descend his will. His power could pass through the huge portal at any time and appear in this world. The only flaw was that the portal was still not large and sturdy enough to allow Sardras to pass through. "Can I come in?" A voice that made Tyrant's body tremble came from the entrance of the hall. Duque nodded. Manaroth immediately roared, "Come in." If not for Duque and Tyrant, Illidan would undoubtedly be the smallest. This time, Illidan was obviously prepared for anything. Even when he saw Duque, he could still greet him in a formal manner. However, no one knew what was going on in his amber eyes. Tyrant looked at Illidan, her mouth twitching, but she did not say anything. No one made things difficult for Illidan because he was the main character today. The deep portal suddenly fluctuated, and in the next second, a mysterious power suddenly filled the hall. This mysterious power came from the distorted void in the distance. Sardras's huge shadow suddenly filled the huge hall that was more than 30 meters tall. His booming voice rang out immediately after. "You're Illidan Stormrage, the one who proved your loyalty to the army, the one who could do what others could not?" Illidan bowed his head deeply to show his respect. "That's me. As a mortal, you are very powerful." Sardras spoke from another world. After a moment of silence, he said, "But your strength is worthless in my eyes." Illidan said coldly, "Perhaps I can make His Majesty descend upon Azeroth." Chapter 1054. The hall fell into silence once again. As the minutes passed, Manaroth became restless. He had never seen Sardras so quiet. Sardras finally opened his mouth. "Let's hear it." Illidan raised his left hand. An illusion of something appeared in his palm. The demons were a little disappointed. Illidan had only shown an ordinary golden disc. This traitorous mage went straight to the point. "This is my method. Soul of the dragon." Every demon overlord's expression turned cold. This was especially so for Manaroth. He had personally witnessed its violence and felt its immense power. Relying on this divine weapon, the Dark Dragon King easily wiped out an entire elite demon army of tens of thousands of demons. Even the surrounding night elves that were twice the number were affected. The Deathwing Nesario stirred up chaos in this world, and even chased the other dragons away when they tried to stop him. It turned out that everything originated from this inconspicuous disc. Although His Majesty has never descended into this world, I'm sure you've seen its power. Illidan continued. You definitely want to take it for yourself. Yes. Sardras was honest. But you never thought that it could help you come to this world, right? Illidan's voice was full of temptation. Sardras didn't answer this time. Silence was the answer. Manoroth snorted. Illidan was no doubt shrewd, cunning and selfish. The Burning Legion had long coveted this artifact, but it had always been in the hands of the Black Dragon King. When the demons could finally gather their strength to hunt down this fallen dragon aspect, they missed the opportunity because they were busy dealing with Illidan's kin. Infernal portal, what do you think? The leader of the Burning Legion suddenly turned to ask Duque. Your understanding of teleportation magic surpasses all the warlocks in the Legion. Duque bowed humbly. There's no doubt that it has the power to open a portal. If it's ours. In less than a second, Duque changed the topic. He stared at Illidan maliciously and said in a serious tone, but if the power of the dragon's soul is too great and not controlled well, it may blow up the portal and even the entire well of eternity. This second was so long that Tyrant and Illidan felt like they had been tortured for a century. Illidan was terrified. How could his crazy plan be seen through by this terrifying lord who stole his lover? Tyrant fell into despair. Yukong, have you really fallen? You're actually so considerate of the Burning Legion? It was as if Tyrant could foresee her hopeless future. Watching his compatriots being annihilated, watching his beloved forest being burned to the ground. No, not just the forest, perhaps the entire planet Azeroth would be destroyed. Almost as soon as Duque finished speaking, the Eridar twins and even Sargeras nodded slightly. Manoroth couldn't wait to laugh. He was looking forward to Sargeras punishing Illidan, because this skinny elf was obviously up to no good. Just as everything was about to be decided, Duque changed the topic again. Of course. That dragon's soul is really that powerful. I strongly suggest that we upgrade the usage of this thing. Upgrade? Sargeras was surprised. Duque raised his two fists. A one-way portal will never be stable enough. The more powerful the being, the more power is needed to pass through the portal. My lord, think about it. If only Azeroth has the power of the Well of Eternity and the dragon's soul, and the Twisted Nether has nothing. Would it be balanced? Your suggestion is, it's best if the type of magic on both sides of the portal is the same. Since Azeroth needs the Well of Eternity and the power of the dragon's soul, then we can build a bigger and better portal in the Twisted Nether to correspond with it. If we succeed, the Burning Legion will invade other planets in the future, and that new portal will also be useful. When Duque said this, the eyes of all the demons lit up. Duke continued. Before we open the largest portal, we can try to see if we can bring the giant dragon's soul through the portal, or we can directly transfer part of the giant dragon's soul, his power, to the warped void portal. Duke began to narrate the plan he had come up with on the spot. All the demon lords, including Sargeras, were mesmerized by the story. Why, that's right. As early as 10,000 years ago, the Burning Legion already had interstellar battleships. Doesn't it sound very classy? It felt like using a laser weapon to beat a primitive man with a stone axe. Was it a one-sided beating? That was wrong. The Burning Legion was actually a bunch of idiots who only knew how to use a small portion of the functions of the interstellar battleships. Duque secretly asked, and it turned out that those interstellar battleships were actually stolen by Sargeras from the Pantheon. Unfortunately, Sargeras' original body was full of combat talent, and had no talent in science and technology at all. As a result, a large number of high-tech battleships were used as landing ships. The most common way for the Burning Legion to use interstellar battleships was to directly aim the bow of the battleship at the ground, stick it into the earth like a fallen tree, and use the battleship as a landing ship while blasting the Earth's crust. Or, in an extremely tasteless manner, they opened the portal of the battleship and used it as a landing portal after landing. Then, nothing. The fools of the present had not figured out how to use the demonic cannons that ruled the Azeroth 10,000 years later. Well, Sargeras was illiterate. Naturally, it made the demons below miserable. Jaden was extremely smart, but he was a schemer, not an inventor, and definitely not a time traveler. He didn't have the ability to invent a whole set of scientific theories from scratch, especially physics and space theory. After all, this group of guys was too violent and didn't want to improve. They would kill all creatures of the opposite sex at the drop of a hat. Where would there be so many scientists to study and figure out how to use interstellar battleships? The upper and middle levels were like this, and the guys below were not much better. In the end, the entire Burning Legion became an amusing amalgamation of both high technology and primitive abilities. Now there was Duque, the cultured, proven capable and loyal great hoodwinker, who said to them, "I'm well read, I won't lie to you. From top to bottom, they all believed him and unanimously approved Duque's Mjolnir portal plan. After the discussion, Sargeras turned to Illidan. Well, how are you going to offer me the soul of the dragon? Chapter 1055. Illidan mysteriously took out a black scale. The scale exuded a violent aura, and everyone immediately thought of the cunning Black Dragon King. I can easily find Nisario. Illidan was extremely determined. Sargeras seemed very happy. All right. You will be rewarded as a reward for your loyalty to me. However, this will require you to pay a small price. Illidan looked up. For the first time, a trace of unease flashed across his slender face. My Lord Sargeras, it is already my honor to have you personally come to Azeroth. I don't need anyone to help me, is that so? But, I insist. Sargeras let out a mocking laugh, displaying the temperamental nature of a demon king. Suddenly, two dark green flames shot out of the portal with a whoosh. The flames were so bright, it was as if two suns had shot out of the darkness at the same time. When Duque turned his head, he used a shadow to block Tyron's eyes. The Void Dukes also dodged or blocked the attack. Only Illidan had nowhere to run. He couldn't dodge Sargeras' spell at all. The flames leaped into his eyes. His eyeballs, one of the weakest organs in the body, suddenly felt a terrible burning sensation. Ah, no! Illidan screamed in pain. His screams spread throughout the hall and even outside the huge palace. There was no longer any trace of arrogance left on his face, only pain, extreme pain, as if his soul was being burned to ashes. Tyron didn't dare to look. She trembled in fear and desperately covered her mouth, subconsciously looking for comfort. She threw herself onto Duque's back. She thought she would hate this action, but she didn't. Unfortunately, she didn't. She hid behind Duque like a pair of lovers. If Illidan still had the luxury of time, he would be furious. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to care about others. Everyone in the hall watched in surprise as the flames in Illidan's eyes burned brighter and brighter. Sargeras' terrible power pulled on Illidan, forcing him to be tied to a cross and tortured. He opened his arms, his feet off the ground, and his whole body was pulled into the air and bent backward. It was as if in the next moment, this incomparably famous hero would be broken like a matchstick. Illidan's eyeballs were burned to ashes in the first instant, but the flames did not extinguish. The flames fueled by evil magic continued to burn into his eye sockets. When the raging flames burned away the last trace of blood and flesh in the eye sockets, the flames suddenly extinguished. Illidan collapsed on the solid stone floor like a dead dog. Even though he could still feel the lingering pain in his nerves, he was still in so much pain that he wished he was dead. All of his arrogant expression had disappeared. At this time, Sargeras' voice sounded again. My loyal servant. Illidan obediently lifted his head. His eyes had already disappeared, leaving only two empty eye sockets on his face. Only a few wisps of green smoke lingered in the eye sockets like ghosts, neither slowly disappearing nor becoming fiercer. From now on, your vision is now my vision, Night Elf. The Infernal Seer doesn't trust you and I agree with him. But from now on, I think I can start to trust you. Illidan didn't make a sound. Obviously, the great pain made it impossible for him to maintain his focus. But Duque could clearly feel Illidan's hatred. The hatred of stealing his lover. The hatred of destroying his eyes. No matter which one it was enough to make Duque's hatred in Illidan's heart forever. Sure enough, every big boss level demon could be easily fooled. Even though Sargeras had begun to believe in Duque's plan, he still refused to hand over such an important matter to a certain existence. Provoking the hatred between the two would ensure that the two would never be of one mind. This was checks and balances. This was the Demon King's way of controlling his subordinates. Good scheme. Good plan. If Duque wasn't a veteran transmigrator who had transmigrated twice, he would probably be tricked when Illidan tricked the Burning Legion. As for Sargeras' precautions, Duque only wanted to say, haha. However, it was useless. Time passed day by day. There weren't many surprises. The only one that could be called an accident was the rebellion of Dasrima Sunstrider. This grandfather of Kale, that was very smart. He noticed that when Sargeras will could easily descend, the Burning Legion's attitude towards the High Elves didn't change. The last batch of demonic crystals was just a personal gift from a high-grade lord. This obviously meant that the Burning Legion had never really valued the High Elves. Dasrima hated the disgusting appearance of satyrs. As a true noble, a wise man who was good at thinking, he began to realize that what Queen Azhara said should be an empty promise. He had wanted to leave Azhara's camp for a long time, but he didn't have a good proof of allegiance until he accidentally found the soul of the demigod Cenarius's eldest disciple imprisoned in a small soul crystal. And that was the side hall where Duque lived. Recently, Duque was busy with the mysterious Mjolnir project. He and the Gemini rarely returned to the side hall. The eldest disciple of Cenarius and the high priestess of the moon goddess. This will be a very good gift. Dasrima thought and did so. In the end, the founding ancestor of the Sunstrider almost lost his life in the city of Azhara. The dancer Seleka, whom he thought he could easily knock out, was unexpectedly strong. Took Dasrima a lot of effort to subdue her. He thought that since he had saved Tyrande in the name of righteousness, the high priestess of the moon god would immediately follow him. In the end, Tyrande screamed as she took out a spellslayer bow and shot at him, almost nailing him to the wall. The only lucky thing was that he still managed to get his hands on the soul crystal. He broke it immediately and released Malfurion. In the end, he activated the teleportation before the demon guards arrived. Yes, it was a teleportation that took up to 10 seconds to cast. He found that he couldn't understand what Tyrande was thinking. After he released Malfurion, Tyrande shrank into a corner of the side hall. She didn't attack him, nor did she follow him. With no other choice, Dasrima could only run away before the teleportation channel in Azhara was sealed. When Duque returned, Tyrande threw herself into Duque's arms and whispered, "Promise me, end this as soon as possible. I'm going crazy. No matter who succeeds, end it quickly." Duque said in a low voice, "Okay." Chapter 1056. At the Mount Hygel defense line in the northwest of the continent, the Burning Legion launched a new wave of attacks. The Night Elves who were on the defensive needed sleep and food to replenish their energy, but this became their weakness. The demons didn't need this. They could fight day and night tirelessly until they died on the battlefield. They would only retreat and stop fighting when they were at an absolute disadvantage. Even if they retreated, they would quickly return and soak every inch of land in blood. This time, the demons realized that their opponent's strength had increased greatly. Now the Night Elves were no longer fighting alone. They had more troops in the battle. The Taurens, dwarves, and other races were like charcoal in a snowstorm, greatly increasing the strength of the defending army. This was also the first time the Burning Legion had suffered a defeat. The demons retreated step by step, and they were less than a night's journey away from the destroyed Surma city. Although they had won many battles recently, Malfurion, who had returned to the allied army, couldn't be happy. This wasn't just because his home Surma had been destroyed beyond recognition by the various battles. His unease came from the new strength in his army. As the leader of the allied army, Distel Starry Eyes, an idiot who had climbed to the position of commander-in-chief after Ravenkay's death, was Malfurion's greatest source of worry. As someone who had experienced the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, the Battle of the Dalajan, the Battle of Mount Hygel and many other battles, Luo Ning couldn't help but sigh. Compared to Duque, Distel's commanding ability wasn't even a fraction of Duque's. Duque could combine different races, troops with different weapons and even armies with different levels of technology into an orderly whole, unleashing the greatest power. Even the logistical supplies that most of the allied commanders didn't know how to do were organized. From killing the orcs to defeating the Scourge army, to taking care of the Burning Legion's demons, the allied army really hadn't suffered any losses. However, the Night Elves didn't truly join forces with other races to fight alongside them. Distel arranged his soldiers to the left and center of the army, while the other races were arranged to the right. The different races rarely interacted and didn't affect each other at all. If this could still be considered an alliance, then such an alliance was destined to fail. Those demons would constantly replenish their strength and launch even more ferocious attacks, often aiming at the intersection of the various races with incomparable ruthlessness. The only bright spot was that this new alliance had a large number of powerhouses. Almost every time they relied on their strength to turn the tide. Brock suddenly leapt up, his movements smooth and fluid. It didn't seem like something a bulky body like him should be able to do. The gray-haired orc brandished the two-handed greatsword that used to be the blade of natural disaster and was now called the blade of judgment as he charged into the enemy formation. Brock let out a wild roar and swung his greatsword, easily slicing 5 demon guards in half at the waist. With a kick he pushed the still trembling body onto the back of the evil demon. Of course the fiercer one was still Lord Ho. This #1 orc warrior swung the blood howl, that was also famous at this point in time, carving out a path of blood. In an instant 20 to 30 demons were sent flying. Some were dead, some were turned into spare parts, and some were on the verge of dying. It didn't matter if you were a small demon pawn or a low-rank demon lord, none of them were a match for Lord Ho. Hellhound, 1 chop. Doomguard, 1 chop. Lord of the Abyss. And it was AF * King Chop. Before Lord Ho's strength was exhausted, there was no demon that Lord Ho couldn't kill. Lord Ho was ferocious. The only problem was that Lord Ho's explosive fighting style consumed too much energy. Luo Ning had to get someone to pull Lord Ho back to rest once every hour. Thus, Lord Ho had a new nickname in the Alliance army, 1-Hour God of War. With Malfurion's return, he naturally shouldered the heavy responsibility of recovering his mana. The group of heroes could unleash their full strength. The siblings, Maeve Shadowsong and Jared Shadowsong, weaved through the enemy formation at high speed. Maeve's crescent blade easily set off waves of blade whirlwind among the demons, sending flying knives to the enemy's vitals. As usual, Luo Ning used his powerful arcane magic to suppress the Eridar warlocks. However, the one who killed the most warlocks wasn't him, but the elusive Vanessa. With the support of her luxurious top-grade equipment that blinded everyone, Vanessa often used backstab from the back of a warlock followed by a combo and cut the warlock into minced meat. There was no need for her to use a 5-star eviscerate or other ultimate skill. It seemed inconspicuous, but when the results of the battle were tallied, Vanessa threw out a bunch of warlock staffs. Every big boss in the Alliance army was dumbfounded. Even though the demons fell one after another, new enemies kept surging in from behind. The Night Elves' battle line began to shrink as if they had been hit by a hammer. They had been fighting the Burning Legion for a long time. Not a single one of them wasn't exhausted. Archimonde was too cunning. He had taken advantage of this weakness of the Night Elves. An Abyssal Lord shouted, "I am XX," before the battle started. Then like a tank it charged into the formation and started a massacre, until it was killed by Lord Howl or some other expert in the Alliance army. However, not long after, the portal opened again in the Alliance army's sight. An Abyssal Lord that looked exactly like the Lord that had just been killed laughed sinisterly and shouted, "I am XX back." Mortals couldn't possibly know that the souls of the killed demons returned to the twisting nether to be resurrected actually came at a high price. They only saw that they had terrifying enemies that could never be killed, and would resurrect immediately after being killed. So when more and more ferocious demon warriors with long fangs entered the battlefield, the morale of the elves collapsed. If it wasn't for the demigods of Azeroth acting together, such as Cenarius' father, Malorn the White Stag, as well as the remaining 4 dragons suppressing the enemy's air force, the battle would have been over 1,000 miles away. No, we can't go on like this. Our military strength isn't infinite. Even if we gather the combat power of the entire planet, we will still be exhausted to death. This wasn't just the thought of Cenarius, but also the thought of all the big bosses. What should we do? Even Malorn smiled bitterly. Maybe we can blow up the Well of Eternity and cut off the demon's entrance, Malfurion suddenly said. How? Everyone's eyes lit up. Soul of the Dragon. Malfurion spat out 4 words. But we can't find that traitor Nisario. The Red Dragon Queen gritted her teeth. At this moment Ronan suddenly interrupted, "No, maybe I can." What he took out was a black dragon scale that had crossed 10,000 years of time and space. Chapter 1057. When Ronan spoke, Alexstrasza wanted to say, "We can't wait to catch him and tear him to pieces, but that black dragon is so well hidden that even our own dragons can't find him." However, when Ronan took out the dragon scale, the 4 dragon kings were speechless. Of course, they recognized that it was something from the dragon race. The 4 dragon kings recognized at a glance that it was definitely Nisario's scale, and not another black dragon's. At this time the blue dragon king Maligos, stared at Ronan with bloodshot eyes. The entire blue dragon race tried to protect me, but they were annihilated. Even my spouse, Sindagosa, died in battle. Even so, I couldn't hurt that traitor Nesario at all. I couldn't even tear off a scale from that bastard. How did you do it? Ronan was speechless. Was he going to tell Malygos at this time that it was his master who killed Deathwing 10,000 years later, who asked him to bring it here? Facing Malygos, who had fallen into a berserk state, Malfurion suddenly took half a step forward, blocking the line of sight of the Blue Dragon King and Ronan. Get out of the way. It's none of your business here. Little elf. Malygos glared at him. Malfurion shook his head slowly. He suddenly remembered many things. What he thought about the most was still nothing. The mysterious Void Lord who claimed to be Du Kong. To be fair, he was also angry because Du Kong had taken what he loved. However, he was helpless. The situation of the war was already in danger. If he did not do anything, the fate of the entire world would be irreversible. Before he was rescued by Darima, Du Kong personally told him that the key to turning the situation around was the soul of the giant dragon. He wanted him to find a way to reasonably let the soul of the giant dragon fall into the hands of his brother, Illidan. As for what that plan was, Du Kong refused to say. Malfurion did not know what his brother's plan was either. Malfurion would never easily trust Du Kong. He did not even dare to fully trust Roddick, who had made countless contributions but was extremely mysterious. After all, the humans on the Kalimdor continent were just a bunch of ignorant barbarians who didn't even have their own language. Whether it was Roddick or the mysterious female thief, they obviously came from a more civilized world that had a more systematic understanding and application of knowledge and power. Malfurion had made up his mind that he would study the dragon soul for a while before he decided to deal with it. In any case, the situation couldn't get any worse. Even without Sardra's arrival, the Allied army would be exhausted to death by the Arkharan army. Taking a deep breath, Malfurion held his head high and looked at the sky. We actually have a top-secret plan, and many people have paid a price that even the dragons can't imagine for it. Am I right, Goddess Elune? That's right. The will of the moon goddess Elune descended. I believe in my child, she and he will not let me down. As a true god, the moon goddess Elune's words carried far more weight than those of the demigods present. Since even Elune was defending Malfurion and Ronan, although they didn't know what the plan was and everyone's curiosity was about to explode, no one dared to interrogate the goddess if she didn't say anything. They could only bow in agreement. In the end, the anti-Burning Legion allied army sent a small team consisting of Malfurion, Krasus, Ronan, and other mortal powerhouses to investigate Nesario's lair. While Nesario's body almost exploded from absorbing too much power, and he had no choice but to let the goblins inlay a large number of high-strength metal plates on his body to stabilize it, Malfurion successfully stole the dragon soul. No, it should be called the demon soul. Now, he also discovered that the ancient gods who had once occupied planet Azeroth and plunged the entire planet into chaos and madness were the masterminds behind Nesario's betrayal. Enzos and the other ancient gods were only sealed deep underground when they were suppressed by the pantheon gods of creation. Unexpectedly, they also took the opportunity to stir up trouble. After Malfurion succeeded, he turned around and left on the spot, wanting to inform everyone of this shocking news as soon as possible. However, this very powerful team was ambushed. The combination of Illidan, Verosin as Hara's guard captain, and the Eridar Gemini had successfully snatched the demon soul from Malfurion. While Malfurion was shocked, he also had the deepest fear of Du Kong. This mysterious powerhouse had already planned everything. What could be more reassuring than snatching something from the hands of a mortal enemy? Malfurion was speechless for a long time as he looked at Illidan, who had fallen into a state of madness and had no idea that he was actually a pawn. After returning to Azhara City, Illidan saw the demon soul being held by the Gemini as they walked step by step towards the teleportation door at the top of the palace. Although he was expressionless, Illidan's heart was pounding. For the first time, he didn't want to hand the disc over to a demon. He knelt on the ground and looked up at the voluptuous and flirtatious Gemini. He gritted his teeth and said, "My lords, compared to you, I can use the magic in the masterpiece of the Black Dragon more freely. With the gift from my master, I now know it like the back of my hand." To strengthen his persuasion, Illidan lifted the hood over his eyes. The Eridar Gemini saw his eyes and couldn't help but frown. But who was the Gemini? Kill Jaden's deputy, one of the most cunning existences among the demons. The Gemini smiled. What you say makes sense, but it's meaningless. But our great Lord Sargeras is the true owner of the disc. Shouldn't he be the one to decide who uses the disc and strengthens the teleportation door here? The Gemini's words made sense, and Illidan was actually speechless. Through the dark teleportation door at the top of the palace, the Demon King said loudly, "The existence that has the right to use this divine item can only be I." Even though he was even more unwilling, Illidan could only follow the other demon lords and bow deeply and kneel down. At the same time, in the distorted void, an incomparably huge rock the size of a moon floated there. This was one of Sargeras' palaces, and it was also the gathering place of the demon army that was prepared to follow Sargeras to teleport to Azeroth. There were thousands of levels in the huge three-dimensional fortress, and each level was at least 20 meters high. Almost every corner was filled with demons who were eager to fight. The total number of demons here was calculated in units of billions. Chapter 1058. This was a terrifying number. Unless a mortal stood tens of kilometers away, he wouldn't be able to see the end of this terrifying army even if he twisted his neck. Think about it. From top to bottom, from left to right, they were all huge, malevolent-looking demons. No matter how you looked, you couldn't see the end. How shocking was this? How terrifying was this? Back then, the Eridar Gemini had shown Tyron such a scene, which caused her to lose control of her heart. If Duque hadn't used his authority as a lord to intercept Tyrant, she might have already fallen into the hands of some extremely vile demon lord and become a broken slave, or even be tortured to death. Obviously, Sargeras didn't even need to come personally. As long as these demons all threw themselves into Azeroth, they would be overwhelmed by their absolute numbers, be it dragons or demigods. Beside the mountain-like Sargeras, there was a floating magic platform in the air. After the seemingly insignificant Duque did a series of operations, he bowed to Sargeras and said, "Your Majesty, everything is ready." What appeared in front of Sargeras were 12 huge artificial satellites, each with a diameter of 100 meters. These magical creations were created by all the Eridar warlocks in a short span of 2 weeks. They were far more complex than any Eridar warlock could imagine. Sargeras had secretly ordered the Eridar warlocks to keep an eye on Duque, but the warlocks soon gave up. Their level of magic was too primitive. Duque had only used a few common magic formulae from the later generations, along with a bunch of side magic circles that were supposed to increase stability, but were actually used to confuse the line of sight. He was able to fool the Eridar warlocks who were in charge of inspecting the magic circles. This is fixed-point strengthening. Magic will weaken in the air, understand? It won't weaken? Why can't your shadow arrow hit the opposite planet directly, but only 30 or 40 yards? This is an automatic control circuit. Once the magic node runs out of magic, this light will light up. Then we will replenish the magic here. Is this a magic ballast that can stabilize the output of magic power? As an engineering student who had studied automation's strong and weak electricity, Duque used a whole set of physics and engineering knowledge that could not be applied to the field of magic to fool people. Every time he tried to fool someone, he would be an idiot. Many Eridar warlocks even ran over eagerly to become Duque's disciples. Just bluffing wasn't enough. The Burning Legion was the most simple and violent place, and all that mattered was the results. Duque's dimensional gate was indeed effective. When Duque said that he was ready, Sargeras began to travel through the void and absorb mana from Azeroth's demon's soul. Even though it was slightly contaminated, the dragon aspect's power still originated from the creation titans of the Pantheon. The power they used was completely different from the dark energy that destroyed life and extracted the power of the planet. This was a power that the Pantheon Temple had obtained after tens of thousands of years of traveling in the universe and modifying it countless times. It was the most suitable and widely used power for traveling in the universe. Usually, power would be greatly depleted after teleporting a short distance. But the power of Demon Soul was different. Even if it traveled through the void for who knows how many light years, under the control of Sargeras' will, most of the magic was still injected into the 12 satellites that Duque had built. Although Duque wanted to name the 12 satellites goddess of Twilight's necklace. It was a pity that the domineering name, Mjolnir's hammer, was more to Sargeras' liking. According to Duque's bluff, this dimensional gate was the hammer in Sargeras' hand, and he could smash it wherever he wanted in the future. The charging of the satellites that made up the dimensional gate began. The group of demons looked at the readings on the meter that Duque had personally built, and the percentage points rose one by one. After waiting for a full hour, the charging was completed. Duque said loudly, "It's done. Your Majesty." Opening Mjolnir's hammer will allow your Majesty to reach Azeroth with less effort. But the last layer of the planetary shield will have to be handled by your Majesty yourself. Open the gate. Sargeras' voice rumbled. After Duque recited a long and complicated incantation, the 12 satellites that looked like a necklace shone with a mysterious magical light. Soon the light on the 12 satellites connected in a clockwise manner to form a complete circle, and then the circle drawn in the distorted void glowed with the unique light of the dimensional gate. Sargeras could tell almost immediately that this extremely huge dimensional gate that could accommodate him was better and more stable than any of the Burning Legion's portals in the past. Infernal affairs. You did well. In the huge fireball, a few boxes that emitted powerful magic waves passed through the void and flew directly in front of Duque. That was Sargeras' reward for Duque. Duque was like a hungry dog snatching shit. He rushed over and put away all the boxes without even looking at the surrounding demons. On the other side in Azhara, Demon's soul floated in the middle of the Well of Eternity, shining with a dazzling light. In the deep hole formed by Sargeras' incantation, the power of the demon's soul and the Well of Eternity churned continuously, about to form a stable dimensional gate. The Demon King was in his terrifying world, preparing to enter this latest spoil of war. Soon he would destroy all life in this world, and then he would destroy the next world with life. Apart from him, there were some special existences waiting expectantly. Their dreams were terrifying and even more primitive than the dreams of the Demon King. They had waited for a long time to regain their freedom and take back what belonged to them. Every time Sargeras strengthened the dimensional gate, they were one step closer to success. With the help of the Well of Eternity, the demon's soul and the powerful power of the Demon King, they could open a window to freedom in the eternal prison, near Surlama. The allied forces that sensed Sargeras' arrival began to panic. On the ground, the demigods led by Malorn launched a fierce attack on the Burning Legion. At the same time, Archimonde also hoped to use a decisive victory as a gift for his master's arrival. As soon as the battle began, it directly entered the most brutal state. The wild boar demigod Agamagan slammed into 2 abyss lords, or sent them flying, or used his long teeth to pierce their bellies. But his huge size attracted even more firepower. Mother Shiraz's 6 evil scimitars slashed at him in succession, and the Doomsday Lord Kazak's shadow arrows bombarded him simultaneously. In the end he couldn't hold on and died on the spot. Chapter 1059. This was true for demigods, not to mention the mortals. A large number of lives were consumed like ants. In this primitive and backward era, no one knew how many people had died except for the relatives and friends who were familiar with those who had sacrificed themselves. Perhaps the demigods of Azeroth could find a chance to revive in the distant future. But mortals were dead. The battlefield was filled with a tragic atmosphere. If not for the fact that the Burning Legion only wanted to kill and destroy, the morale of the mortals in the allied army would have collapsed. In the sky, the dragons chose to give it their all. No one can guarantee that the spy hidden in the Burning Legion or Illidan's Stormrage will be able to close the portal. We can only trust ourselves. Give it your all. We will close the portal with our own power. Alexstrasza encouraged the 4 dragon aspects, as well as the dragon assault team, Krasis, Malfurion, Ronan, and the others. This was destined to be a charge filled with pain and despair. The sky of Azeroth was filled with dark clouds. Unfortunately, the dark clouds were formed by the apocalypse guards that were hovering in the air. Archimonde had personally gone to deal with the strongest demigod, Malorn the White Stag. Those left behind in Azeroth were not weaklings either. For the army, Apocalypse Lord Mephistos roared. His huge claws fell from the sky, and the Apocalypse Guard army that was as dense as a swarm of locusts slammed into the Dragon Tribe's assault team like a huge wave. The 4 dragon aspects were undoubtedly the strongest in Azeroth. The strong bodies of the dragons, coupled with the power granted by the creation titans, made them very strong. However, the betrayal of the Wings of Death had extracted part of their souls and their power cores. Even Alexstrasza, who used life as her power core, was only left with less than 40% of her power from her peak. Facing the siege of dozens of void dukes of various sizes in the sky above Azhara City, even someone as powerful as them fell into a desperate and bitter battle. They could not even get close to the outer city walls of Azeroth. A single dragon breath could kill more than a dozen large apocalypse guards, but half a second later more demons filled up the gap. They did not have the time to catch their breath at all. Giant dragons relied on their claws, mouth, wings and tail the most. When Malfurion landed, he summoned a net of vines below them. Hardly had the experts been caught and the momentum of their fall slowed down when Azhara's counterattack arrived. Countless demon guards and hellhounds swarmed out of the city gate. On the tall city wall, the high elf mages and Eridar warlocks lined up neatly in 3 rows, showering the heroes with spells of all colors. "Follow me." Malfurion led the heroes into an enormous sewer that could accommodate 2 carriages at the same time. In the sewers that were not submerged, there was knee-deep black blood and a large amount of corpses emitting an unbearable stench. After Malfurion opened the gigantic alloy fence that had been enhanced by magic with a special secret technique, they had to endure the stench while they continued to charge toward the forbidden palace of Azhara. But soon they were also blocked by the flood of demons that surged into the sewers. At this moment, in the tower next to the Well of Eternity in the center of Azhara, a bone-chilling roar suddenly came from the portal that Sargeras used. Even if they could not see it, anyone with the slightest magical sense could feel a terrifying storm brewing in the Well of Eternity. Obviously, that was the Burning Legion's unique demonic storm. Sargeras is about to arrive. Is everything over? Unable to hold it in any longer, Ronan directly used Arcane Impact and broke through the sewers that they had been proud of as a barrier. The heroes charged toward the ground in a suicidal manner and rushed toward the inner city. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar came from the sky, even louder than the loud noises on the battlefield. Deathwing rushed in and descended from the stormy clouds in the sky. He charged straight toward the demon's soul that was floating above the Well of Eternity. "Wine. That's mine. You despicable thieves. No one is qualified to take it away from my claws." Deathwing obviously fell into a state of madness as he charged madly toward the demon's soul. Although Krasis and the others were full of anger and wanted to protect Deathwing who had betrayed the dragons in such a situation, they had to shout in their hearts, "Well done." The Burning Legion was powerful, so the demon lords never cared whether their enemies were one or a group. Anyway, they were all guys that had to be dealt with. Only the most evil and powerful races that thirsted for destruction and destruction like them were qualified to join the Legion. Since they dared to steal from Nesario, they dared to face the revenge of the Black Dragon King. Balnazar, Malganis, Khazroga and Crosis, the 4 winged demon lords, flew into the air. However, the 2 Dreadlords and the 2 Doomsday Lords were only in the air just in case. Boom! A huge 3-dimensional protective magic circle suddenly appeared in the void, and an evil yellow-green light bloomed, bouncing Deathwing away. Not only was it bounced away, but it also caused considerable counterattack damage. No! The Black Dragon once again rushed toward the magic circle that could not be passed through. His body continued to burst into flames because of his excessive strength, causing his body to crack. He had to use the armor made by the goblins to maintain his body, but now the counterattack of the magic circle had triggered his injuries. Obviously, the armor had not completely sealed the cracks on his body. His eyes were wide open and he rushed toward the demon's soul with anger. He was so fast that Malfurion was dumbfounded. This time there was a change in the magic circle. A cluster of green light that illuminated the entire world enveloped the entire black giant shadow. Nesario was tricked and directly suffered a big blow. He screamed and somersaulted at least 5 times in the air. Even the 4 demon lords who had been waiting at the side flew over together, ready to take advantage of the situation. At this moment an accident happened. Deathwing's dragon blood sprayed on the ground. This was originally an inconspicuous thing. Obviously, the Burning Legion did not expect Nesario's dragon blood to be extremely corrosive. Unfortunately, the black dragon blood was poured on 2 of the 6 magic circle nodes, directly melting the Eridar wizard on the node into a pool of flesh and blood. The magic circle collapsed immediately. There was a big explosion. After a series of tremors, the existences of different factions were shocked to see a seemingly slender blue-purple palm grabbing the small demon's soul disc. That was blind, Illidan's storm rage. Chapter 1060. A few hours ago. It was a terrifying day, a dark day where the sun and moon couldn't be seen. Ever since Illidan suggested that he would give Sargeras the demon's soul, Tyrant hadn't been able to sleep. The few times she did, she would take a short nap out of exhaustion. On rare occasions when she learned that Sargeras was about to obtain the demon's soul, she fell asleep. Unfortunately, she had a nightmare about the destruction of the world. When she woke up, she sensed a man's aura beside her. "Malfurion, are you here to save me? Or is it you, Illidan?" The prayers of the beauty were destined to go unanswered. Tyrant opened her eyes after passing through the hazy fog only to see Duke. To her surprise, it wasn't Duque in his shadow form, but a completely normal Duque. Tyrant was shocked. If not for the familiar dark energy around him, she would have thought that he was a different person. Duque pulled Tyrant up and held her by the waist domineeringly. But it was this rough movement that gave Tyrant a sense of security from the familiar touch on her waist. It really was him. Du Kong could actually be considered as a handsome man. No normal woman would like to be wantonly possessed by a pitch-black humanoid creature. It was a terrible experience that challenged the limits of a woman's acceptance. From the initial anger and resistance, to numbness and acceptance, to the current acceptance, to the pleasant surprise after losing hope, Tyrant suddenly realized that happiness could be very simple sometimes. Duque smiled faintly. "Tyrant, thank you for your hard work. Today is the day that will decide our fate. I hope that you can come with me and witness the results of our hard work together in this period of time. This proves that all of our grievances and patience have paid off. This is not the will of the goddess. It is purely yes." Tyrant's mouth twitched and the muscles on her face twitched slightly. Her exquisite and holy face seemed to be telling Duque that she wanted to be happy, but was also afraid that she would be even more disappointed and hopeless later. It was this incomparably contradictory feeling that made her speechless for a long time. I. Tyrant was at a loss for words. "Come on." Duque did not explain further and entered the shadow form again. Just like that, he led Tyrant through various corridors and doors. The high elves and demons they met on the way all bowed respectfully to them. In their eyes, Duque was a rare, powerful and intelligent technology-type lord in the army. She was different from those lords who only knew how to fight and kill. She was also different from those demonesses who only knew how to scheme but didn't have high combat power. For the time being, this infernal lord was irreplaceable in the army. Thus, even though they considered Tyrant to be the slave of the infernal lord, they didn't dare to slight her in the slightest. After arriving in the void, Tyrant saw Sargeras's gigantic and terrifying true form. She also saw Duke open a huge portal and teleport Sargeras to the space barrier of planet Azeroth in one breath. Even now, Tyrant still didn't understand what Duque was trying to do. Wasn't Duque still helping Sargeras descend? When Sargeras' mountain-like body disappeared through the void portal, Tyrant could clearly hear the cheers of the Eridar warlocks in Duque's control center. The demons were roaring, singing, and celebrating the fact that they were about to conquer and destroy a new planet. "Alright, you can all leave. I want to celebrate with my baby." Duque spoke in the Eridar language which Tyrant couldn't understand. However, before the male Eridar demons left, they gave Tyrant an "we understand" expression. Tyrant's face heated up. Filled with a sci-fi feel, the metallic hall that could accommodate 100 people instantly became empty. None of the Eridar demons felt that there was anything wrong with Duque's order. Because Duque had already proven his loyalty to the army and had completed his mission well. The status that Duque enjoyed now was a matter of course. Tyrant braced herself and walked over to Duque's side. She knew that she couldn't defy Duque or Duque's divine sword. He wanted. At that moment, Duque gently hugged Tyrant and whispered into her long ear, "Now it's time to witness a miracle. We have to conserve our energy because it's going to be dangerous." Duque snapped his fingers. and the huge screen in the hall projected a real-time image of Azhara's surroundings. Tyrant saw the battle between the demigods of Azeroth and the main force of the Burning Legion. She saw the demigod, Malorn the White Stag, appear. As the guardian of nature, Malorn was known as the most powerful creature that walked on Kalimdor. He was one of the strongest creatures on Azeroth, just like the Dragon King. Guardian of the Way, Holy Spirit who protects all, Great Ancient Guardian. More than 10 titles and titles fully reflected Malorn's greatness. In the image, Tyron was shocked to see that Malorn had easily flattened an entire elite demon army of the Burning Legion in order to save his injured son, Cenarius. Archimonde had no choice but to appear to prevent the entire army from being destroyed by Malorn. The duel between the two powerhouses made Tyron think of phrases like, a duel between the strongest of two worlds. After the earth-shattering battle, Malorn, who had already been seriously injured in the previous battle against a large number of demons, was defeated by Archimonde the Corrupted. Although he had been evenly matched with the Demon Lord, Archimonde broke his neck. Archimonde won by a narrow margin. Ah! Tyrant cried in horror. Because the one who died was the spouse of the goddess she believed in, Duque could only comfort her. Don't worry, demigods can be revived. It just takes a little longer. Then the image moved to the vicinity of Azhara, and Tyron saw the allied army's surprise attack turn into a bitter battle. She saw Nesario's chaos and failure. In the end, the center of the image locked onto Illidan, who had obtained Demon's soul. Illidan. No one knew whether Illidan had aimed for this opportunity long ago, or if he had just appeared there by accident. All they knew was that because of the magic circle's explosion, Demon's soul had been blown away. Now within 100 meters of Illidan, there was nothing that could stop him. If Illidan wanted to do something to the platinum-shaped demon's soul, now was the best time to do so. Brother. 800 meters away, Malfurion exclaimed in shock. Chapter 1061. 4,000 of years, Malfurion rarely used this title to refer to his biological brother Illidan. At that moment he wished that his brother was still the hero who fought for his people. He was not disappointed. Because Illidan shouted in front of everyone, Tyrant, do you see this? I'm about to become the hero of Azeroth. Wait for me. I will rescue you from the clutches of that infernal underworld demon. Yes. He was going to become the hero of Azeroth, not the hero of the Burning Legion. When he said this, it formed a huge contrast with his eyes that had been destroyed by Sardra's blessing, and the evil Legion runes that covered his shoulders. Great. What jumped out of Malfurion's mouth was exactly such a delightful word. For a moment, Tyrant cheered in her heart, even though she had always disliked Illidan's stubbornness. Illidan was a stubborn maniac who desperately wanted to prove himself. When he wanted to study under the demigod Cenarius, Cenarius found out that he could not calm down and learn the way of nature, so he rejected him. Feeling humiliated, Illidan immediately turned around and joined the Moon Guards. He used his identity as a Moon Guard to expose and prove the Queen's conspiracy. After the leader of the Moon Guards, Latusius, died in battle, he took over the leadership of the Moon Guards. However, Illidan was still too radical. His mana burn often burned his fellow Moon Guards to death, regardless of friend or foe. This caused him to offend many of his comrades. Unexpectedly, in order to win, he would act like Dukong. On the surface he would side with the Burning Legion, but in the end he would find a way to fight back. Tyrant was happy for Illidan. At least her childhood friend had not truly fallen. Unfortunately, Tyrant's happiness did not last for more than a second, because she immediately realized that Duque was too calm. That strange calmness was as if he was waiting to see Illidan make a fool of himself. Duque's behavior was like a bucket of cold water poured over Tyrant's head. In fact, Duque did not want to hurt Tyrant's feelings. He even hoped that Illidan would reconcile with Malfurion on the spot like he did in history. He wanted Illidan to cast the demon's soul, and send the demons of the Burning Legion back home. However, dreams were always beautiful, but reality was always so painful. From the very beginning, Duque felt that something was definitely wrong when he returned to 10,000 years ago. With Nozdormu's violent and straightforward personality, he would never do something like throwing Duque into the ancient war to kill him. Therefore, Duque always tried his best to avoid fighting with all his strength. Sure enough, history books were meant to be torn. Right after Illidan's self-expressive, delusional speech, tragedy befell him. You really are a spy. Sargeras, whose true body was still outside the space barrier, roared angrily. Since Sargeras said the word sure, then he must have a backup plan. The stone under Illidan's feet was suddenly blown away. Even though Illidan was a master of both magic and martial arts, and had amazing dodging abilities, he could not avoid this trap that he had prepared for a long time. An extremely complicated circular magic circle with a diameter of 30 meters suddenly lit up under his feet and easily caught Illidan. Dozens of large and small demonic giant hands grabbed Illidan's hands and feet. They twisted his entire body backwards and lifted him high into the air. Hee. You're a lowly traitor. Do you really think that the demon's soul was accidentally blown to your side? I lied to you, idiot. See, you've been exposed now, haven't you? One on the left and one on the right holding the platinum disc from both sides. Of course, it was the Eridar twins. The figures of these two female demon overlords could be seen in almost every secret operation. On the side of Azeroth, almost everyone's heart fell to the bottom. Even Duque's heart skipped a beat. As expected, history had changed greatly. In a world where one traveled through time and time again, any small change in history could lead to the death of an important historical figure, and thus change history greatly. However, Duque did not move even though Tyrant, who was in his arms, had begun to tremble. It was Duque's calmness that affected Tyrant. On the other side, Sargeras's voice came again. Give me the demon's soul. I have no time to care about a little bug that is destined to be destroyed along with this world. Yes. Yes. The Gemini twins smiled. They were very happy. They had helped their master's master at a crucial time. After this, they would definitely be rewarded handsomely. They were already looking forward to what kind of reward they would get. Something shocking happened again. The demon's soul, which was supposed to fly back to the center of the Well of Eternity under Sargeras's power, suddenly fell to the ground. It wasn't just the platinum disc. Even Illidan, who was in the air, and the Eridar twins, who were less than 30 steps away from the disc, knelt to the ground involuntarily. It was gravity. An unimaginable gravity. 2 times, 10 times, 50 times. In just a few seconds, with the platinum disc as the center, everything within a radius of 500 meters was surrounded and dominated by the arcane magic circle that shone with azure light from the deeper underground. A large magic circle that was obviously part of the Forbidden Palace of Azhara overpowered the Gemini's magic circle and controlled the entire scene. Even the magic that Sargeras sent from the teleportation portal was forcibly dispersed by this even more domineering force. Who is it? Who's behind this? Suddenly, the ground at the center of the magic circle opened up. It was a relatively narrow circular area with a radius of about 5 meters. An unexpected person appeared, Queen Azhara. She was as elegant as ever and her appearance was perfect. Surrounded by a few personal guards and 2 maids, she slowly walked up the spiral staircase and stood still. Then she raised her head and puffed out her chest. Facing the direction of Sargeras's will, she said something that would make anyone's balls ache. Sargeras, do you really want to marry me and make me the queen of the Burning Legion? Let me share your power and glory? Huh. Everyone who heard this was dumbfounded. Most of them only knew that it was Queen Azhara who single-handedly attracted the Burning Legion, but no one knew that the queen had such an idea all along. Different races. Different styles. She actually wants to date. Everyone's reaction was one word. Dumbfounded. Chapter 1062. It sounded exaggerated, but when one thought about it carefully, it made sense. The stubborn high elves attracted the Burning Legion in pursuit of greater power, and they called Sargeras God and Creator over and over again. They longed for self-evolution, longed for more power, but what did they get in the end? Apart from the most fanatical ones who followed Sargeras to become satyrs, the remaining high elves were actually feeling uneasy and afraid. If it wasn't for Duque temporarily comforting them with the demonic crystals after Archimonde's arrival, perhaps guys like Dethrima would have split up earlier. In the original history, Queen Azhara had always foolishly believed, or perhaps hypnotized herself, that as long as Sargeras married her, everything would become perfect. In this way, she and her followers would be able to bear the consequences of the destruction of their country and territory. After all, if she became the mistress of the Burning Legion, she and the High Elves would obviously gain more. Unfortunately, this beautiful fantasy was mercilessly pierced by the cruel reality. None of the lords of the Burning Legion took the High Elves seriously. If it wasn't for Duque, the lords would even cruelly exploit them, making them work day and night to open the portal. In a sense, the relatively gentle Duque had become the last spiritual harbor of the Queen and the High Elves. It was a certain traitor with bad intentions who told the Queen the truth. The Legion would not look up to a weak race like the High Elves. Either they were more powerful than Eridar in magic, or they were comparable to the Lord of the Abyss in close combat. Since Sargeras betrayed the Pantheon 15,000 years before this point in time, and formed the Burning Legion to dominate the universe, it had been 15,000 years of history, and all kinds of powerful creatures had found their place in the Legion. Basically, there was not much hope for promotion. Only people like Duque who fought his way out could be promoted to a higher position. Just by selling beauty and a planet, she wanted to become Sargeras' wife. What a joke. Of course, Duque didn't tell the Queen directly. He leaked it to Celia when he was bored, like a slip of the tongue. Celia used to be the Empress's maid. She was here to bribe Duque and was also the Empress's spy. Duque was not worried that his words would not reach the Queen's ears. Duque was not afraid that the Gemini would find out and tell on him. After 15,000 years of continuous victories, the entire army was filled with absolute arrogance. Even the Gemini believed that the moment Archimonde arrived, the outcome had been decided. No one cared about the feelings of the High Elves and treated them like pebbles that could be found on the side of the road. Only the Highborn Elves thought that they were gems or something. Because what Duque had revealed was the truth, Queen could no longer deceive herself. She chose to stand up. Even if she had to threaten or make a deal to force Sargeras to marry her, she wanted to complete this political marriage. Of course, Duque was not the only one who made Queen Azshara step forward. Duque used the System Elf scan to find a well-hidden cultist among the High Elves. When it came to unscrupulous brainwashing, there was really no one better than that one. In the end, under the instigation of that one, Queen Azshara activated the inherent magic formation in the Forbidden Palace at such a perfect time and began to force Sargeras to abdicate. Wishes were beautiful, but reality was cruel. Who was Sargeras? Just because of a disagreement, he flipped over his boss's car and ran off to work alone. Then, as if he had too much on drugs, he casually killed hundreds of millions of creatures every few days. It seemed that such an existence would bow down to a mere elf? Then where would King Sargeras put his face in the future? Moreover, Azshara was not a beautiful orc with sexy fangs in her mouth. Her chest was as big as a coconut, her waist as thick as a bucket, and her butt was as hard as a rock. No way. Of course not. President Sargeras swore to die. His earth-shattering roar resounded throughout the world. Even the thick black clouds in the sky were shaken away. What a joke. No one has ever threatened me, Lord of the Burning Legion. Demon King Sargeras, not in the past, not now. Not in the future. Insignificant worm Azshara, are you ready to pay the price for offending me? Ha. Ha ha ha. Ha. Azshara laughed. Her staccato laughter gradually became maniacal. Everyone who heard Azshara's laughter could feel the ominous and hopeless tone in her voice. Far away in the twisting nether, Tyrant couldn't help but hug Duque's waist tightly. On the other side, Azshara had indeed fallen into some kind of extreme hysteria. Ha ha. Sargeras, for you, I am willing to go against the entire world. Now all the gods and demigods in the heavens as well as my people want to tear me into pieces. You actually dare to tell me that I am threatening you by asking you to marry me? Ha. Ha. Actually, President Sargeras was also very bitter. Who knew that you, a nuisance queen, would marry him without even seeing him? The so-called sweetness, the so-called endless glory, were all things that you, Azshara, never agreed to. President Sargeras was also furious. His main body was still outside the spatial barrier, and he angrily tore at the spatial barrier while cursing, Azshara. Just you wait, after I enter this world, the first thing I will destroy is you and your powerless and arrogant people. Sargeras, I won't give you this chance. Azshara picked up the demon's soul that guard Captain Verosin had handed over and raised it high. The next moment, as Azshara chanted a mysterious and evil spell, everyone realized that something was wrong. This is Malfurion's whole body trembled. This was not any language that existed in the world. Tracing back, it could be traced back to the even crazier Dark Empire period. That was the terrifying era when the Kalimdor continent was ruled by the believers of several ancient gods and elemental lords. Out of nowhere, a few consciousnesses descended. Yes. That's it. Well done. Azhara, you will receive a reward. This continent will be destroyed, we will be free, and a new order will be established on the ruins. You will become the unique queen of this planet. Malfurion's face turned green. Not good. It's the few ancient gods of Enzoth. With the ancient gods in hand, it was definitely not a good thing. No one had thought that the crazy ancient gods would actually want to blow up Kalimdor so that they could escape the cage left behind by the creation titans. Chapter 1063. Evil light bloomed in Queen Azhara's hands. Beside her were her most loyal servants. They were all fanatics who were willing to sacrifice themselves for the queen. Now they were also kneeling on one knee, watching the queen's actions with fanaticism. Haha. Perish. Sargeras, you ungrateful be***. I won't give you what I can't have. Azhara's once elegant face was now twisted with madness. The demon's soul in her hands had the most intense reaction with the well of eternity that originally belonged to her. The black well water suddenly shot thousands of meters into the sky. Azhara's city began to tremble. No, the entire Kalimdor continent began to tremble as well. No, someone stop her. In the sky, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza screamed in fear. In the void, the moon goddess Elun did not hesitate to use her divine power to attack Azhara's magic formation with the falling starlight. It was useless. The magic formation of Azhara had been in operation for countless centuries. With the support of the Well of Eternity, it could even withstand divine power at least for a while. You'll regret this. Be***. In the distance, Sargeras was frantically tearing at the spatial barrier. He was speeding up to enter this world. The teleportation gate in the south of Azhara's forbidden palace had opened slightly, and a hole the size of a fist had appeared. The Demon King's terrifying aura was spewing out from inside. If they left it alone, Sargeras would be able to come out with time. At this moment, a slim female figure suddenly appeared behind Queen Azhara. Ah! Tyrande, who was watching the live broadcast in the twisting nether, exclaimed. Unexpectedly, Duque nibbled on Tyrande's earlobe and whispered, "She's my servant." Yes. A servant who seemed to have entered without permission had changed the entire situation. Queen Azhara would never have thought that someone would be able to sneak behind her even after she had sealed off the magic circle and isolated herself from the outside world. Your Majesty. The guard captain Varlason drew his sword decisively. He was half a step too slow. Vanessa snatched the demon's soul from Azhara's hand. She didn't attack Azhara directly because Duque had repeatedly told her that the queen's magical protective gear was terrifying. It was completely synchronized, and Azhara's magic circle actually had such a small gap. Everyone could see that Ronan was pressing something that looked like a pillar. The magic radiance spreading from his hand told everyone that this was his doing. Under the guidance of a certain traitor surnamed Du, Luo Ning effortlessly found the node of the magic formation that outsiders didn't know about and interfered with it. Vanessa threw Demon's Soul to Malfurion in the most glamorous way. Roddick. Alexstrasza, please lend me your strength. I might even have the chance to destroy the portal. Hurry, the chance is fleeting. Malfurion shouted. In the distance, the four dragon aspects, Luo Ning, Krasis, all the powerhouses of the allied army who could control their mana were offering their power. The colorful elemental light flew towards the tiny druid. At the same time, the lords of the Burning Legion also pounced over crazily, trying to stop Malfurion. All the powerhouses of the allied army, including Grom, pounced at the lords. They wanted to use their own bodies to stop the demon lord's interference. Everything was ready, and all they had to do was wait for Malfurion's final attack. If their last effort failed, none of them would survive. Malfurion's eyes flashed with the light of power. He directed everyone's mana towards the portal, where Sargeras had already dug a huge hole big enough for a Lord of the Abyss to pass through. Malfurion firmly believed that Sargeras, who was busy breaking the spatial barrier, didn't have the time to care about him. This made it possible to gather everyone's strength and take a risk. The mana of the powerhouses was too powerful, so powerful that Malfurion's mortal body couldn't withstand it at all. For a moment, Malfurion almost thought that his body was going to explode and die. However, it seemed to have sensed his will. This heaven and earth, this world, every creature, every plant began to lend their power to Malfurion. Silently, a pair of huge antlers grew out of Malfurion's head. It was the symbol of an envoy of nature, just like his master, the demigod Cenarius. They were extremely beautiful antlers. Malfurion felt that his mana had multiplied by who knew how many times in an instant. The enormous mana that had gathered in the demon's soul in his hand, which had almost crushed him and seemed as heavy as 1,000 pounds, was suddenly pushed forward. "Go back, Sargeras!" Malfurion roared, and an indescribably huge surge of mana shot towards Sargeras like lightning. Originally, they thought that Sargeras would be directly pushed back by this huge force. Everyone was wrong. The huge energy mass that was the size of a small mountain was actually blocked by Sargeras with one hand. Just the black gas on his hand was already stopping the energy mass from going any further. What was more terrifying was that the evil dark power started to envelop the energy mass. It wasn't hard to imagine that if Sargeras was given a few more seconds, all the efforts of the Azeroth heroes would be for nothing. No, almost everyone screamed in their hearts. Just then a green figure fell into the portal like a meteor. The green figure was so inconspicuous that if they didn't pay attention, they would easily have missed it. In the next moment, everyone saw a shocking scene. Sargeras, the great demon, was actually injured, but only a small one. There was a shallow wound on his right leg. Krasis' sharp eyes recognized that it was caused by a large sword. It was Brock's blade of cataclysm. Every transmigrator's eyes were filled with bewilderment. None of this seemed to be possible. However, the magic sword that came from Archimonde's corpse 10,000 years in the future had really injured Sargeras. This top-grade greatsword had caused substantial damage and pain to Sargeras, who had an extremely high defense. Malfurion seized the opportunity when Sargeras was momentarily distracted. Explode. He easily detonated the energy. Finally, at the position of the portal, there was an earth-shattering explosion. No, not just the portal. Even the branch of the Well of Eternity that was connected to the portal was affected. In less than half a second, even the entire Well of Eternity changed color. Not good. If this happens, not just the Well of Eternity but the entire planet will explode. In the sky, Izra's face was pale. Chapter 1064. On Earth, in the era of the most serious confrontation, the most serious would be Old Sue and Old Me throwing bombs at each other, turning the Earth into a nuclear winter. In Azeroth, even if the Well of Eternity exploded, it would at most blow up the center of the ancient Kalimdor continent. But when the huge energy was mixed with the spatial barrier in the portal, it wasn't a simple matter of 1 + 1 = 2. Back then, the Titans of creation had put in a lot of effort to create this planet's spatial barrier. The spatial formation around Azeroth was not only a barrier that prohibited entry, but also a pillar that supported the planet's existence. It was like unscientifically taking the planet's core out of the atmosphere and wrapping it around the planet. If the planet's core was forcefully smashed from the outside, the planet would be finished. Of course, it wouldn't be so troublesome for the Burning Legion to just destroy the planet, but it would be much more troublesome to squeeze in and snatch the treasures inside. Malfurion detonated the huge ball of energy that crashed into the portal, causing the entrance of the huge vortex to tremble continuously. Then it lost its internal strength and the portal began to collapse. The edges of the portal that were burning collapsed one after another. As a fallen titan with supreme divine power, Sargeras still wanted to forcefully rebuild it with his powerful spatial magic. Unfortunately, it was too late. The situation had already gone out of control. Even with the power of the Titans, there were times when they couldn't do anything. Brock's sword had stunned Sargeras for a full second. It was that precious second that had stolen the victory of the Demon King. Despicable ant. Under Sargeras's flames, the old orc Brock, still smiling, was reduced to ashes. The long campaign had finally come to an end. The regret of not dying with his comrades had drawn a full stop on this ancient battlefield that had been 10,000 years since he was born. Brock, Grom cried, which was rare for him. Many of his comrades had died on the battlefield, but he didn't cry. Even when most believed that the tribe had perished, he didn't cry. But when this comrade whom he wasn't too familiar with, nor was he unfamiliar with, slashed out in order to save the world, the great Grom Inferno roared and cried. His lacrimal glands seemed to have collapsed, allowing tears to gush out of his eyes and mix with the blood staining his face, turning his face into a mess. Unfortunately, not many beings had the time to notice Master Roar's feelings. Because the situation was still very critical, Sargeras was unwilling to accept the fate of failure. He forcefully smashed open a part of the unstable space barrier and stepped out of the portal that was about to collapse. He wanted to force his way into Azeroth and repair it at the same time. His desire caused the spatial structure of the planet to become even more unstable. Just as the explosion of the portal began to spread, the Demon King found himself stuck in the portal, unable to escape. He couldn't escape and he couldn't retract his leg. He threw away the sword in his hand and punched the entrance with his fists, but to no avail. The passage between the two worlds rapidly shrunk until he was sandwiched tightly in the middle. Sargeras roared, his voice reverberating in everyone's hearts. I will not fail. Absolutely not. The portal kept shrinking and Sargeras seemed to be shrinking as well. He tried his best to open the passage and under his immense power, the inside of the portal started to catch fire, bursting out with an indescribably terrifying energy turbulence. At the same time, this also caused a terrifying tremor that affected the entire planet's crust. We have to do something. Nosdormu roared. We have to push Sargeras out or he'll bring us down with him. Alexstrasza was like a madman, forcefully taking on the big moves of the three demon lords, and rushed towards the portal. Unfortunately, she was still too far away. Is this the end? Malfurion was the most desperate. In order to stop Sargeras from entering this world, he was the one who had detonated that ball of energy. Who would have thought that this was considered doing bad things out of good intentions? If Sargeras came in, the planet would be destroyed. If the portal exploded, the planet would still be destroyed. After working so hard for so long, this was the result of despair. Who could take it? At this time, many demon lords stopped, and so did the heroes of the Azeroth Coalition army. Everyone stared in the direction of the portal with the greatest fear and despair. They were waiting for the situation to change. If it really exploded, then everything they had done would be for naught. No. Master hasn't done anything yet. Vanessa said. Yes. Master loves to do big things. Ronan replied. I don't want to admit it, but at a time like this, we can only rely on him. Even Krasis nodded. After spending so much time together, Malfurion knew very well that these mysterious powerhouses were all heroes with good hearts. They had the most noble sentiments and the most resolute will to fight. They could be said to be the most resolute and perfect comrades. The him they were talking about was naturally the Nothing, who had helped Malfurion and imprisoned him. He was also the Dukong that Tyron had mentioned later on. In the end, we still have to rely on that Dukong? Malfurion's mouth was full of bitterness. He thought of many things. He thought of the peaceful days in the past, and the time he had strolled in the lush garden with Tyrant. He couldn't help but think that his last hope had actually fallen on that mysterious Dukong. How laughable. So many mortals, so many powerhouses, even demigods and true gods, all wanted to break the shackles of fate and control it with their own power. But in the end, they could only rely on Dukong, who was hiding in the Burning Legion. Malfurion thought of the time when Tyrant cried and asked his trapped soul, "What should I do?" The helplessness of giving up on love still gnawed at his heart like a poisonous snake. Bastard. I don't care if you're willing or not. You've already taken away my most precious thing, and the fate of billions of lives on this planet is in your hands. Don't disappoint us. Otherwise, even if we die, we'll curse you with the fiercest power possible. Malfurion thought back to Duque's pitch-black appearance and tried to convince himself to trust this mysterious and unreliable fellow. It was rare that even Malfurion, the honest guy, let out such a cry. Not to mention other existences. Who was it? It didn't matter who it was. Who could save Azeroth? Come quickly. This world is going to be destroyed. In the twisting nether, Tyron was so shocked that she couldn't speak. At this moment, Duque suddenly grabbed her hand and smiled. Did you know? The best singers are always the last to appear. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, As the Demon King roared and hit the wall with all his might, a huge shadow of a black figure suddenly appeared above the portal. It was Duque in his shadow form. "Come back, Sargeras." The next moment, an irresistible suction force came from the other end of the portal and forcefully pulled Sargeras back into the portal. Chapter 1065. Master. Master. I knew it. Bastard, couldn't you have shown up earlier? Vanessa, Ronan, Krasis and Grom spoke in different tones, but they expressed the same meaning. The surrounding experts immediately realized who this black figure was. Could he be? Alexstrasza was stunned. "I'm afraid so." Isra nodded lightly. According to the moon goddess Elun, these demigods all knew that there was a super spy in the Allied army who had infiltrated the highest level of the Burning Legion. Although no one knew who this spy was and no one knew what this spy could do. But in the end, at the most critical moment, the spy boss suddenly jumped out and set Sargeras up. This was really a big event that the Allied army was happy to see. Sargeras used his sharp fingers to firmly grasp the unstable inner wall of the portal. Your infernal affairs. Impossible. President Sargeras' eyes widened. He couldn't believe that the person who single-handedly sent Archimonde to Azeroth opened the portal to Azeroth for him, and did something that no Eredar warlock could do. A new Void Lord with a bright future would betray him at this time. Did the intelligence of the Titans drop after they fell? Idiot, you don't understand the meaning of the pseudonym of infernal affairs. Duque smirked. Illidan and Malfurion noticed that a few long strands of dark blue hair floated next to Duque's image. Was Tyron beside him? The bitterness in the Stormwind brothers' mouths deepened. In the next second, Sargeras didn't disappoint the Allied army. He roared and was forcibly sucked back. The portal that lost its support began to shrink rapidly. But this wasn't the end. The powerful spatial fluctuations caused by the big explosion just now showed no signs of subsiding. Just when everyone wanted Duque to do something, Duque didn't disappoint them. Things have gotten out of hand. Looks like Azeroth City can't be saved. Duque looked distressed. Even though Duque was talking about something terrifying, the faces of all the big shots of the Allied forces were filled with unconcealable surprise. Previously, the planet could not even be saved. It could explode at any moment and everyone would be wiped out. Now they were only going to blow up Azhara? Is this for real? If this was the price they had to pay for this world-shaking battle, then wasn't this price too light? No one dared to say that Duque could or could not do it. Every big shot raised their heads and waited for Duque to make his move. In the distorted void, Duque turned around with a smile. "Oh, I told you that I would let you witness a miracle." Tyron still couldn't believe it. He felt like she was dreaming. How did the terrifying Sargeras get sucked back just like that? Dukong isn't lying to me, right? It couldn't be a fabricated illusion, right? If these were all illusions, then weren't these illusions a little too realistic? Tyron suddenly realized that Duque was holding her hand and pressing a large blue button. Just now, Duque had pressed the leftmost button. This is the second button that will make the Burning Legion pay a heavy price. You've wronged yourself and sacrificed so much. Shouldn't you vent your anger now? Tyron was completely dumbfounded. She subconsciously chose to believe Duque and pressed the button with her trembling hand. In Azeroth, although the Demon King had been sucked back, which was an unbelievable result, the crisis was still there. Either the following explosion would destroy everything, or the portal would remain open, and the Burning Legion and Sargeras would still have a chance to enter Azeroth again. Just then, the intense explosion that seemed like it was about to spread to the entire world suddenly stopped. There was a sudden deathly silence in the air, as if the entire world had become silent. The wind stopped, and even the water from the Well of Eternity that had almost reached the sky fell back down. There was no longer any sound. This strange scene made all the big shots of the Allied forces look at each other. 3 seconds later, the roar of the wind resounded throughout the Well of Eternity, Azeroth, and even the entire Kalimdor continent. A seemingly chaotic gust of wind surged in the air. Even though it was turbulent, it had the power of a hurricane. Fortunately, Isra managed to dodge it in time. Like an apocalyptic storm, the wind blew violently. It was more violent than any hurricane that mortals had ever seen before. The giant dragons in the sky were caught off guard and were sent spinning in the air, flying around randomly and even crashing into each other. Unexpectedly, they soon regained their balance. Only a few unlucky ones who collided with each other grimaced in pain, but this was nothing to the thick-skinned wyverns. More importantly, the wind just now seemed to have disappeared. The focus wasn't on the wyverns but on the demons. The doomsday guards and all the flying demons couldn't escape this disaster. These winged demons couldn't control themselves in the air, and they couldn't do anything about the terrifying hurricane. A few demons crashed into each other, their skulls cracked and limbs broken. Many demons died just like that. But in the strong wind, their corpses didn't fall down. Instead, they spun rapidly on the surface of the well of eternity. It was as if a supergiant was drinking pearl milk tea, and these tragic demons were the so-called pearls. The next moment, the suction force suddenly increased tenfold, then 100-fold. But to the giant dragons, this violent hurricane was like a summer breeze. They didn't feel anything at all. To their enemies, it was hell. They were in a mess. Tens of thousands of doomsday guards spun in the air, until the last one was mercilessly sucked into the portal. The big shots of the allied forces were dumbfounded. They never imagined that there was such a terrifying spell or some kind of device in the world, and that it was specifically used against demons. The demons that were still breathing wailed loudly, just like the screams of the weak creatures they had destroyed and slaughtered. But it was useless. They were like scraps of paper in a wild storm, unable to resist this terrifying storm. Not only the Air Force, but even the ferocious-looking demons on the ground were sucked into the portal from all directions. At first it was the smaller ordinary demons like the Hellhounds, then the demon guards, and in the end even the larger demons that weighed dozens of tons couldn't escape. The demons instantly rushed into the huge portal. In the eyes of others, their bodies began to distort and elongate like noodles. Finally, they became incomparably long liquid-like things that were sucked into the portal. In the end, nothing could be seen. Chapter 1066. The terrifying suction force spread to the demon lord's body. Manarotha's movements started to slow down. He looked at an Eridar and realized that the same thing was happening to an Eridar warlock. The night elves didn't seem to be affected much, but their movements were getting slower and slower. What happened? He muttered to himself. Manarotha's tail hit the floor heavily, trying to resist this force. Just as he raised his hand that was holding the double-headed greatsword, his eyes suddenly widened. His scaly fur was now translucent. He could clearly see the muscles and bones in his body, and they didn't seem real anymore. Impossible, the Burning Legion's vanguard said in a booming voice. Absolutely impossible. A huge force pulled him up and he felt like he was rising into the air like a balloon. Then like a feather he was sucked into the tornado-like crack in the portal. Near the city of Azhara, and even on the entire continent of ancient Kalimdor, every single soldier of the Allied army who was fighting a bloody battle was stunned to see this unbelievable scene in front of them. The demons that had been incomparably ferocious just a moment ago, wanting to tear apart everything in their way, were all sucked away. It was as if the enemies they had fought for months and sacrificed countless lives to resist were just a bunch of laughable illusions. Krasis, Malfurion, Alexstrasza, and even Elune, the goddess of the moon who had sent down her divine will, asked the black figure standing above the crack in the huge portal. What did you do? Me. I just changed the incantation that Enzoth taught me, sucking away most of the creatures in Azeroth, and only sucking the demons into the twisting nether. Duque, who had just done something earth-shattering, seemed extremely calm. You will pay the price. I remember you. The will of an ancient god flashed before disappearing. Almost everyone's heart skipped a beat. As expected, these evil fellows never gave up. However, to be able to change the incantation of an ancient god, where did this Dukong come from? One had to know that in this era, there weren't many existences who understood the ancient god's incantation, unless they were evil cultists hiding in the dark. Speaking of which, this guy really doesn't have any psychological burden at all. First he sold out the Burning Legion, then the ancient gods. He was so daring and reckless. I really don't know how to describe this crazy and outstanding spy. At this moment the teleportation gate was slowly closing. Unfortunately, the well of eternity that had calmed down for a while began to boil again. Duque said, I'll leave this place to you. I need to work on the twisting nether. What are you doing? Isra asked loudly. Duque revealed the most mysterious and incomprehensible smile. It's rare for me to have such a powerful weapon. How can I vent my hatred if I don't get rid of the Burning Legion? Don't worry, after this I guarantee that the Burning Legion will not be able to invade Azeroth on a large scale for at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years? What kind of joke was this? Being able to maintain peace for 100 years was already a miracle. Moreover, the main force of the Burning Legion had only been forcefully dragged away, not destroyed. What right did this Dukong have to say such big words? Unless... An idea that could not be any crazier began to emerge in the minds of all the experts. Could this guy be? They really wanted to imagine what Duque would do, but there was no time. A huge black light began to bloom on the Well of Eternity. A terrifying tremor that seemed to never stop spread in all directions along with the magic power of the Well of Eternity. Boom. With a loud noise, a huge crack at least 100 meters wide split the entire city of Azhara in half, and the huge crack was still showing signs of expanding. The powerful magic seal was still protecting the forbidden palace of Azhara, but no one knew how long it would last. Go. The giant dragons descended and rescued the heroes who had been fighting on the ground. Where's Tyrande? Tyrande hasn't returned yet. Illidan yelled at his brother. Malfurion's body trembled. I don't know, will he? The he was referring to was of course Duque. No one knew what Duque was going to do next. Sitting in the control room of the twisting nether, Duque gleefully tapped the beat and hummed an unknown tune. He sensed the situation outside and even had the mood to tease Tyrande. Tyrande was so scared that her heart almost jumped out of her chest. Even her body was trembling. Don't worry. This is a super long-distance interstellar teleportation. Even Sardras, who was the first to come back, would need 5 minutes and 18 seconds. I also specially chose the slowest spatial tunnel for him. If I'm not wrong, he will come back with his subordinates. What if we're discovered by the demons here? Tyrande couldn't imagine how the hundreds of millions of demons here would react if they found out that she and Duque were doing this. It's fine. I've already secretly blocked all spatial communications here. I have enough time to do whatever I want. What was audacity? This was audacity to the extreme. Although every hero must have a big heart, but to have a big heart like Dooku, it was truly unheard of and unheard of. Tyrande felt a sense of excitement. It was a thrill that she had never felt in her thousands of years of life, from her childhood to her teenage years to her youth. Illidan was very good to her, and so was Malfurion. However, she had never felt such a taboo excitement from these two childhood friends. Ever since she was young, she had always followed the rules, listened to the sounds of nature and followed the teachings of the goddess. She was the spokesperson of the goddess, the example of all that was good. She had never tried to play with the Burning Legion, who could destroy the entire world in the palm of her hand. Walking on a tightrope on a mountain of blades. Dancing on the tip of a blade. Disco dancing at the gates of hell. There was nothing more exciting than this in the world. Her heart was racing, her adrenaline was pumping out adrenaline, and the endorphins in her brain were spreading joy. From the misery, grievance and terror after being captured to the fact that the situation was about to turn around and they were about to successfully defend Azeroth and become a special existence beside the great hero of Azeroth, the complex emotions brought about by the ups and downs were indescribable. The more Tyrande thought about it, the more excited she was and the more afraid she was. Unknowingly, all her thoughts and concerns were placed on this strange man who had once rudely dominated her, gave her despair and gave her the greatest hope. Ha! We're finally at the last step. Duque laughed. Chapter 1067. On this day in the super void fortress of the Twisted Nether, the demons were discussing the battle situation while waiting in boredom, as if they were celebrating a festival. Haha. I'm going to kill to my heart's content this time. This was what the cruel Dread Guardian said. I'm lacking some fresh experimental materials. Remember to tell the idiots below not to kill all the natives. This was what the evil Eredar Warlock said. No one expected that just as everyone was looking forward to a grand and magnificent victory, there would suddenly be movement in the incomparably huge circular teleportation portal. There was no air in the void and there was no medium for sound to travel, so there was no sound. However, this scene made every demon who witnessed this scene feel like they were hallucinating. There was a loud bang in their heads. That was an uncountable number of demons. They were all the lucky ones in the eyes of other demons, lucky enough to be the first to rush to planet Azeroth. Now they were all back in the form of corpses. Most of these strong demons could survive for a long time even if they were thrown into the airless void, into the terrifying polar regions or in lava. Some demons did not even need air to survive, nor were they afraid of high temperatures and flames. Now they were all reduced to dust. A hellhound's horn was pressed against the arm of a demon guard. The Abyssal Lord's belly button no longer had a shield-like waist plate hanging from it, but the skull of a female demon that looked like a specimen of Shivala. They were all torn to pieces and mixed into a ball, almost indistinguishable from each other. This is the Twisted Nether. A demon in the Void Fortress said the greatest fear in the hearts of the demons. Yes. Outside the Twisted Nether, no matter how many times they died, as long as their souls did not collapse, they could be resurrected countless times. However, dying in the Twisted Nether, like this kind of demon whose soul and body were sent back together, was dead. There was no possibility of resurrection. The huge teleportation portal formed by the 12 satellites as the fulcrum became a huge fountain, continuously spraying demon remains into the Twisted Nether. No one could estimate how many demons there were in this place. Obviously, this number was definitely in the hundreds of thousands. What happened? Zhou Xian, who was in charge of guarding and dispatching reinforcements, rushed over when he heard the news. As soon as he flew out of the Void Fortress, he saw a large piece of trash being spat out by the portal along with hundreds of larger pieces of trash. The Arch-Herons and Void Dukes were different from ordinary demons. Although they were in a sorry state, they didn't suffer too much damage. Archimond. Zhou Xian's eyes lit up. He finally met someone he could talk to. What happened? If the low-level demons below died, then so be it. In any case, there were so many of them. It wouldn't hurt even if thousands of them died. But it was different for demon lords and Archimond commanders. Even if he wasn't on good terms with Arch-Herons in terms of overall interests, Zhou Xian was still in line with Arch-Herons. When the magical Eridar language reached Archimond's ears, he was still confused. I don't know either. I just fought on the front lines. There was a guy who looked like a white deer who was very powerful. Took me a lot of effort to barely defeat him. All of a sudden I was pulled back. At this time, Zhou Xian, who had regained his senses, remembered that there was someone else he could ask about this situation. That was the high-tier Void Lord in charge of the portal. His thoughts were immediately interrupted because Sargeras had actually returned. His huge body was almost forcibly squeezed out of the portal. The melted armor covered the fallen titan from his neck to his feet. Sargeras's entire body exuded a black, violent magic. This magic was shockingly powerful. Just looking directly at it would be enough to stab one's eyes and cause pain. In the void control room, Tyrant endured the pain and bravely looked at Sargeras's evil face. It was a face that was twisted and perfect. About 15,000 years ago, Sargeras was still a handsome, almost perfect being. Through Elune, Tyrant learned that the race of this creature was the one who created this world. But now this handsome face was filled with evil. His body was already dead and his eyes were burning with flames. He was in an extremely chaotic state of emptiness. Sargeras had sharp, poisonous fangs. He waved a long and thick tail behind him and jagged scales protruded from the tip of the tail. His hands were curled with demonic claws, and he held an evil sword in one hand. Perhaps it was because of the explosion of the portal just now only half of the sword was left. However, its serrated blade still looked very lethal. Infernal affairs. You traitor. You still have the guts to stay here. Sargeras's roar set the tone for this strange turn of events. Zhou Xian and the Eridar twins who were floating in the air turned pale. If Infernal Affairs was really a traitor, then they would also be in trouble. How terrifying was the voice of the fallen titan. Even though they were at least 10,000 meters away, Duque and Tyrant could still feel the terrifying pressure. It was as if stars were crashing into them. If not for Duke blocking the attack for Tyrant with a wave of his power, Tyrant might have died on the spot, her organs exploding into smithereens. With a thought, the dark energy in Duque's body activated a small spell. Suddenly, an illusory projection of Sargeras' size appeared in the void. Over 1 billion demons heard Duque's voice, which was formed by dark energy waves. Haha. Sargeras, Why don't you ask me why I'm still here instead of hiding like you think I am? Duque's calmness made the Burning Legion's triumvirate uneasy. This infernal affairs was too scary. He snuck in silently and like the other lords accepted the ultra-high purity of dark energy baptism, but kept his heart. He passed all the tests and with his unparalleled spatial magic he climbed to the top of the Burning Legion. Why hadn't he left yet? The answer was simple. He must have something up his sleeve. Let me tell you now, why did I name this portal Mjolnir? Duque's face was dyed with black energy, and a smile that was terrifying even to a demon appeared. Chapter 1068. I don't care what you're up to. Everything is over. You can't betray the Legion just because you want to. Pay the heaviest price for your sins. Following Kil'jaeden's domineering words, the image of something in Kil'jaeden's hand was magnified many times. It was magnified to the point that even Duque and Tyrande, who were thousands of meters away, could see it clearly. It was a lifelike black, translucent humanoid spirit. On the spirit body, a black robe wrapped around this slender and slightly demonic body. It posed in a handsome pose, its face full of complacency, evil, and mysteriousness. "Ah!" Tyrande exclaimed. She knew what it was. It was Duque's soul. Not good. Tyrande was not an ignorant woman. As the high priestess of the moon goddess, she had more opportunities to come into contact with information about demons. Killing, destroying, devouring bodies and even souls. Souls were the last thing that demons could get their hands on. Once one's soul was controlled by a demon, whether it was turned into a disgusting and indescribable existence or destroyed completely depended on the demon's preferences. Duque tilted his head slightly and explained to Tyrande, "If I want to become a Void Lord, how can I not give up a part of my soul? Otherwise, the leader of the Burning Legion would not have given me such an important task." Tyrande's heart felt as if it had fallen into the deepest and darkest hell of despair, and there was no longer any warmth in her. The hatred and resentment that Duque had towards her for everything that he had done to her disappeared at this moment. Even though he knew that he would probably die and even his soul might fall into hell and suffer for billions of years, he still gave the Burning Legion the most tragic counterattack. This kind of heroic spirit was not something that mortals could imagine or even compare to. What was greatness? This was greatness. What was a hero? This was a hero. Even though Illidan and Malfurion were outstanding heroes, compared to what Duque had done, their actions were insignificant. Looking at the only white eyes in the darkness, Tyrande felt as if she had stopped breathing and her heart had stopped beating. Even time seemed to have stopped for a moment. "Are you telling me that if you die, I have to complete the last step for you?" Tyrande followed Duque's gaze and saw the third button. It was a red button with a warning tone. "So, you've already prepared everything? Is that the final button that allows you to continue the plan even if your soul collapses?" Duque's lips curled into a smile, but Duque's smile froze in that instant. This was because Kil'jaeden had already crushed Duque's soul avatar in his rage with a palm covered in hellfire. "Ah!" Duque screamed and knelt down on the spot. Sargeras let out a sinister laugh that shook the entire distorted void. "Infernal affairs, don't think that death is the end. This is just the beginning." Sargeras was furious. The grand plan that he had been planning for so long had been ruined by a small traitor. He couldn't even wait for Duque to die. With a wave of his hand, he snatched Duque's soul from Kil'jaeden's hands and gave him the most terrifying soul punishment. That's right. Just like how he had done the soul punishment hundreds of thousands of times before, he only had to activate the spell and he could use this part of the soul that had been processed by a secret spell to pull over Duque's entire soul. Then he could. Tyrande's entire body trembled. She didn't know how painful the soul punishment was, but she had heard the cries of her sisters who had died in the hands of Eridar's Gemini. None of the physical punishments in the world could make people cry out in despair like that. She wanted to say that she could imagine what kind of pain it was, but she couldn't lie to herself. Looking at the trembling Duque who was sweating profusely, she shouted in her heart, "Tyrande, there's no time to be weak. Don't let Duquang's efforts go to waste. For Azeroth. For the goddess. And even more for Dukong. You have to be strong. Tyrande." Tyrande couldn't care less about Duque beside her. She used all her courage and strength to pounce forward like a cheetah and hit the last red button with her fist. With the press of the button, the 12 satellites suddenly rotated, and after countless teleportations, the magic power accumulated in the satellites burst out at this moment. They were arranged according to the time of the clock. The next moment, the magic on all the satellites gathered at the center point. When the 12 white-hot light beams gathered into one, it released a dazzling light that was as dazzling as the birth of a new star. A thick energy cannon was shot out. From afar it looked like a solid object. In less than 1,000th of a second, the terrifying high-energy cluster covered the distance of more than 10,000 meters and pierced into the base of the Burning Legion, the void fortress that was generally prismatic and built from the inside out of a giant meteorite. As the base of the Burning Legion for more than 10,000 years, the surface of the fortress was mostly covered with precious metals such as krypton gold. The interior was constructed with an unknown alloy that had been treated with high magical protection. In fact, most of the defensive walls inside the fortress were handmade from the remnants of the interstellar battleships that Sargeras had stolen from the Pantheon. But even with the outer layer of super hard metal and the inner wall made from the interstellar battleship shell, it still failed after resisting for a few seconds. The light beam pierced through the fortress's anus and reached the interior. All the huge compartments along the way were instantly set ablaze due to the void extracting oxygen and air. The explosion was extinguished in an instant. Small white light bubbles quickly appeared and extended to the area near the damaged area. In all fairness, the power of this cannon was not small. It was enough to withstand the energy waves caused by hundreds of interstellar battleships exploding at the same time. This meant that in that instant the Void Fortress had lost tens of thousands of demons. Sargeras didn't care. Compared to the Burning Legion, which had hundreds of millions of soldiers, the loss of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions would not affect the Burning Legion's foundation. However, being hit in the fortress's central warehouse where the demonic crystals were stored would cause an explosion that could affect the entire Void Fortress and destroy the billions of demons within it. That was another matter altogether. Chapter 1069. Dark energy had never been a stable and peaceful energy. High-purity dark energy crystals that stored large amounts of dark energy were even harder to deal with. The dark energy obtained after destroying countless planets and slaughtering billions of lives was good stuff. But with the Burning Legion's half-baked science, all the demonic craftsmen could think of was to gather the dark energy, separate it into compartments, and store it away from the outside world as much as possible. Who would have thought that once it was hit by high energy, the dark energy crystals would become a more terrifying existence than a nuclear bomb? A super explosion that no one could have imagined happened. The Burning Legion's triumvirate turned their heads and looked at everything before them in horror and despair. The colossal fortress that they had operated for a full 15,000 years, the Void Fortress that was as big as a planet, and who knew how many billions of demons had been stuffed into it. At this moment, as the explosion spread throughout the entire fortress, one could see terrifying bulges that looked like blisters and lumps on the surface of the fortress. Pft, pft, pft. No sound could be heard in the void, but that was what their nerves told the triumvirate. Expand, expand, expand again. Anyone could see that the Void Fortress was done for. 3 long yet brief seconds passed, and the entire fortress burst into the brightest green light. In the next instant, the green light that seemed ready to extend infinitely retracted, forming a black hole that devoured life, matter, and everything around it, even light. No. Sargeras let out the most miserable scream he had ever let out since he fell. Ever since the Pantheon's rebellion, his 15,000 years of hard work had been destroyed in his lair. Tyrant stared blankly at the scene on the holographic screen. She was crying, and 2 streams of tears had uncontrollably dyed her face red. She was laughing because she suddenly felt that the burden on her shoulders since the Burning Legion's invasion had vanished. At the same time, she had accomplished everything she had to do. Dukong. Hey, do you see that? I've fulfilled our wish. The Burning Legion has been dealt a heavy blow. We've succeeded. I'm here to accompany you now. Perhaps we will suffer eternal torture together. But I don't care as long as I'm with you. At the last moment, Tyron thought of the Storm Rage brothers, but she quickly pushed them out of her mind and turned towards Duque like a moth to a flame. Turning Duque's body over, Tyrant began to rain kisses on Duque's face like a mad woman. She didn't know when the Burning Legion's Big Three would come to deal with her, but she didn't expect to return to the forest that gave birth to her. She wanted to seize the last chance to be intimate with Duque. At this moment a scare happened. Duque suddenly grabbed her waist and scolded, "Stupid woman. Stop kissing me. You're hindering my spell casting." "Casting spells? What spell?" Tyrant, who was in a state of confusion, asked subconsciously. Duque cursed, "Of course it's to open a portal and run away. If we don't run after acting tough, are we going to wait for the three heavyweights to kill us?" What's wrong with you?" Tyrant was extremely shocked and then ecstatic. She wanted to ask Dukong why his soul wasn't taken away. "Let's run first." Duque jumped into a portal with Tyrant in his arms. On the other side, the Burning Legion's Big Three also realized that something was wrong. Oh no. Impossible. How could he? By the time they wanted to stop it, it was already too late. Firstly, they were caught off guard. Secondly, the space around them had already started to shatter. Thirdly, in terms of spatial magic, none of them could compare to Duque. The three of them, who could destroy a world with just a raise of their hands and feet, could not do anything. They could only watch as Duke, whose soul should have been shattered and whom they could do whatever they wanted to him, jumped up and ran away with the girl. He ran away. That's right. He really ran away. Sargeras, Archimonde and Jaden let out furious, heart-wrenching and abnormally twisted roars at the same time. None of the Void Lords dared to go near the three heavyweights. They were afraid that they would be destroyed if they offended them. The Eridar twins were terrified as they hugged each other and trembled. They knew that since the Infernal Affairs had run away, someone else would have to take the blame. They had single-handedly selected the Infernal Affairs, so they had no way to escape. In the void, everything around them was strange and blurry. Images that had been distorted by time and space rushed towards them at high speed, and then were thrown far behind them. She hugged Duque tightly, feeling Duque's warmth and heartbeat. Tyrant didn't dare to do anything drastic, because interstellar travel was a very dangerous thing. If she didn't die in the distorted void after completing such a feat, it would be a joke if she ended up hanging in a spatial crack somewhere in the universe. How did you avoid the soul punishment?" Unable to suppress her curiosity, Tyrant chose to ask the question that had been in her heart for a long time. "My soul is a little special. Once I lose it, it has nothing to do with the core of my soul." "That's possible?" Tyrant was a little shocked. "The universe is very big. Anything can happen." "Yeah." Tyrant didn't ask anymore. She quietly rested her head on Duque's chest. How did Duque avoid the soul punishment of Jaden? Don't forget, Duque was the one and only person in this world who could resurrect himself. His soul was the most special existence. Every time he died, Duque would lose his soul and humanity. Once his soul left Duque, it would be like losing his moral integrity. It would have nothing to do with Duque anymore. Would a person who was used to having his soul deducted for a long time, and who could do good deeds, fuse with or inherit the soul integrity of a saint, really be afraid of soul damage like normal beings? Stop joking. Even Duque himself didn't know how much of his soul was originally his after inheriting Medivh and Alonsis Vale's moral integrity. How long had passed? Tyrant didn't know either. She just realized that she was enjoying the process of being alone with Duque. There was no more responsibility or terrifying threats. There was only peace and security. How she wished that this kind of time could continue endlessly. Unfortunately, after a series of rumbling sounds, Tyrant suddenly realized that she and Duque had returned to Azhara City. However, it was Azhara City that was on the verge of destruction. Even though Duque had absorbed most of the power of the Well of Eternity when he sucked Sargeras away, the destruction still continued. It was just that it was slightly less than expected. Stepping out of the teleportation gate, Duque was a little stunned. He saw a familiar face not far from him looking at him in shock, Celea Ubatilia. Chapter 1070. Outside the side hall that Dooku had once stayed in, a violent gale was howling incessantly, and thunder rumbled incessantly. However, the side hall that had been secretly solidified by a certain person with a magic seal seemed to be the only safe island in the whirlpool of despair that was the Well of Eternity. Ever since he descended into this world, Duque had not had the chance to go anywhere other than the twisting Nether and Azhara city. He was no longer a mage, so he could only use the space magic array that he had asked the warlocks of Eredar to prepare in advance to teleport. Setting the space seat here was a last resort. However, Duque did not expect that this elf maid, who was once tied up by the queen and could be stripped naked with a pinky, would appear here at this time. It was hard to describe the look in Xianxia's eyes. Was it guilt? Fear? Longing for redemption? Or asking for pity? He did not know. It was probably all kinds of emotions, but they were all mixed up in her eyes. Even though the surroundings were noisy, Xianxia could clearly hear the sigh that came from Duque's lips. Sigh. An invisible and untouchable barrier appeared between their hearts. There was no word, but Duque's eyes said, "I gave you a chance." Yes. Duque had tested her before. If this woman, whom he named Xianxia, could keep all of his secrets, he would use other channels to let Queen Azhara know about the ancient gods. It was a pity that Xianxia had always played the role of a spy here, just like what he had done in the Burning Legion. Duque was not a fickle person. If he were to abandon her like this, he would not be able to forgive himself. Seeing that Xianxia had served him and Tyrant diligently, Duque taught her many things, such as the creation of magic circuits, the use of nature magic, and a few inconspicuous spells that would soon become very important to her. However, this was the limit. Looking at Duque, who no longer had a dark aura around him and was instead glowing with a gentle golden light, it was clear to Celia that Duque was a member of the Allied army. His entire body trembled violently, and his mouth squirmed for a long time, but not a single word came out. However, the pleading look in his eyes became even more intense. Sure. She still wanted to beg Duque to bring her along. Duque shook his head decisively. Everyone has to be responsible for their own actions. No matter what my identity is, since you chose to be loyal to your empress and didn't swear to be loyal to me from that moment onwards, the result is already set in stone. Ignoring Xianxia, who was kneeling on the ground and crying, Duque led Tyrant up to the balcony on the second floor. Suddenly, Celia's voice came from behind Duque. If fate allows me to choose again and I choose you, will you accept me? Duque stopped in his tracks. As a transmigrator, he knew very well what was going to happen next. Was it fate? Was it a coincidence? Or was it a prank? Even Duque himself didn't know why he did this. He smiled. His smile was mysterious and filled with certainty. Do you still remember the first spell I taught you? Celia, who had already given up all hope, suddenly raised her head and nodded vigorously as if she had found a life-saving straw in her most desperate moment. Her eyes were filled with tears. It was unknown whether they were tears of regret, desire for redemption, or both. Duque said leisurely, "Not everyone has the right to stand by my side. Back then I entered the Burning Legion with the determination to endure 10,000 years of torture. If you have the courage and perseverance, when we meet again, I will accept you as my maidservant." Duque left. He left in a carefree manner. He didn't take a single cloud with him, but he also left a bitter maidservant behind. He didn't know if this would become an ill-fated relationship, but at the very least, Duque had no regrets. He didn't owe Xianxia anything. Walking up to the balcony, they heard a deafening rumble. Even Duque felt a little scared, let alone Tyrant. "Look." Tyrant whispered into his ear, "Azhara City." They looked into the distance. What they saw was a terrifying scene. The ground of Azhara City had been split in half. The core of the city had fallen into a huge canyon that was at least a few kilometers deep. The entire inner city was sliding towards the Well of Eternity, and the city was surrounded by water. Only by craning their necks to the highest point could they see the huge waterfall that seemed to reach the sky. Yes. Azhara City was in the middle of a huge whirlpool of water. The Well of Eternity was dragging the nearby ground towards its deep hole, as if it was going to swallow the whole of Kalimdor. Azhara City floated on the black water, and the isolated island floated up and down like the wreckage on the water's surface. The funny thing was that the Elven Palace was still standing there, almost undamaged. As Azhara City neared the center of the whirlpool, ominous lightning flashed around the city. Unlike most of the things that left Kalimdor, Azhara City was heading straight for the center of the lake. Duque felt Tyron's grip tighten. She hugged Duque's waist tightly as if she wanted to melt her soft and elastic body into Duque's. Duque wasn't worried about his own safety. His entire body was emitting a pure golden holy light, as dazzling as a lighthouse in the dark. No matter what the reason was, as long as the leaders of Azeroth wanted to know what had happened in the Twisting Nether, they definitely wouldn't let Duque die so easily. Moreover, he was hugging the high priestess of the moon goddess Elun. There was no need to call for help at all. For huge figures of different colors rushed out of the clouds at high speed, falling straight down. The Dragon Kings descended rapidly from the sky and hovered in the air. This was the flying ability of the Dragon Kings. Alexstrasza, Malygos, Isra, and Nozdormu, the 4 Dragon Kings surrounded the side hall next to the Forbidden Palace of Azhara. The Red Dragon Queen stretched her long dragon neck. "There's no time. Quickly ride me." Duque smiled and hugged Tyrant. He turned around and rode on the back of the most respected Dragon Queen in the world of Azeroth. The 4 Dragon Kings flapped their wings and stirred up a gust of wind, even blowing away the ominous storms and lightning around them. Seleka's lonely figure stood at the top of the stairs, watching as the Dragon Kings climbed up quickly. Duque turned into a small dot and completely disappeared from her sight. Chapter 1071. Sitting on the throne in the Forbidden Palace, Azhara's face lost all its color. "It's over," she murmured. "Everything is over." Azhara's maids screamed wildly around her. The queen held an empty wine glass in her hand, unwilling to believe what had happened. She was Azhara, the brightest light. She was the light and the light was her. She was her, the supreme ruler of her people. Even though she knew that destruction was right in front of her, she still stubbornly told herself that she would never allow such a thing to happen. Sargeras refused to marry her. She was just a pitiful creature that was abandoned after being used. Perhaps many of her followers saw this humiliating scene, but she still didn't want to admit to them that she was wrong. She abandoned her people, and in the end she was abandoned by the god that she worshipped. How ironic was this? How bitter was this? The rumbling sound of destruction grew louder and louder. The palace, which had sunk to the bottom of the water, began to be shrouded in darkness. Even the night elf's dark vision couldn't see through it. The only light in the palace came from the violent power of the Well of Eternity. The dark lake water began to surge into the palace, washing away her 2 maids. The maids let out shrill screams and quickly disappeared into the lake water. "I am Azhara," the queen muttered in her heart, her expression still cold. She cast a spell, and a magic shield suddenly appeared around her and the living maid beside her. "My wish is the highest." She used her powerful magic to block the lake water, but as the water got deeper, the pressure on the magic shield increased. Azhara's brows furrowed and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. This was the first time in her life that she had sweated. At this moment, the familiar and disgusted voice in the darkness whispered to her, "We have a way to make you stronger, stronger than before. We can help you." The queen wasn't stupid at all. Especially when a woman had just woken up from a dream of love, this woman was definitely at the smartest moment of her life. She knew that her shield wouldn't last long. Soon, the cold water would swallow her and her followers, and the glory of Azhara City would disappear from this world forever. The silver-haired elf queen nodded. Accompanied by a scream, the glass fell from her hand. Pain shot through her body. She felt her limbs twisting and entwining. She could also feel her back turning into liquid as if it had suddenly melted. Her magic shield was obliterated. Azhara screamed in despair as she was drowned by the lake water. She could also hear other people's voices coming from the depths of the lake. Her maids, her guards, and other highborn elves who still served her. The lake water quickly filled her lungs, but she did not drown. Riding Alexstrasza, Duque watched from the sidelines as the city that symbolized the highest arcane civilization of the Night Elves was sucked into the center of the giant whirlpool. Duque didn't know whether he was following history or changing it. For a moment he even had the mischievous thought that if Azhara City could be blown into pieces before it sank to the bottom, a new masterpiece would be born. Unfortunately, since he dared to attract the ancient gods and even used Queen Azhara to trick Sargeras, then the ancient gods that joined him, such as Enzos, would definitely not let Queen Azhara and her followers go. It was very likely that after a few centuries, a new horror would be born under the sea. Duque shifted his gaze away from the center of the Well of Eternity. Witnessing the standard world-shattering disaster quickly dissipate in all directions, Lin Feng's eyes widened in shock. Large pieces of land on the ancient Kalimdor continent were still being pulled into the lake, and the power of the horrifying scene didn't diminish at all. It looked like a domino effect. The land kept falling and the horizon kept expanding. The only fortunate thing was that because the Burning Legion was massacring with Azhara City as the center, all the creatures in the vicinity had basically run away. Otherwise, it would have been another large-scale massacre and Duque might have felt a little guilty. What a pity. Mountains were uprooted one after another. Large tracts of land split open in the raging whirlpool, and then disappeared into the center of the whirlpool. Sitting on the Red Dragon Queen and looking down, Duque saw the land where the elves lived disappear without a trace in the blink of an eye. No power could withstand the destructive impact of the Well of Eternity. Perhaps to nature, even the bloody massacre of the Burning Legion was nothing. After all, what the Burning Legion did couldn't compare to what was happening now. Beyond his reach, the wheel of history still followed its inherent inertia and continued to move forward. Without the influence of external forces, everything was inevitable. A red dragon approached his queen at high speed. Ronan sat on a red dragon and waved his arms vigorously. Seeing that his master was safe and sound, he was very excited. Master Kong. Ronan, who was still very innocent, almost let it slip. Duque rolled his eyes at him. A few more dragons came over. Grom clearly saw Duque and then, humph. He snorted and turned his head away. No one knew if he was sulking because he couldn't repay the favor or if it was something else. Krasis also came with a smile. On the other hand, Vanessa, the maid with a belly full of evil tricks, didn't say anything but when Duke looked at her. This bad maid, who often challenged her master in all sorts of ways, looked at Tyrande in Duque's arms. Her face was full of mockery and she actually mouthed a few words to Duque. Bird. Beast. Male. Baron. No, no, no. The wind must be too strong and my eyes must be playing tricks on me. Confess and be lenient and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. As an honest and reliable young master, how could Du Mok admit to such a thing? It must be an illusion. This is definitely the world's fault. In the distance, the outline of Mount Hyjal appeared on the horizon. Looking down from the sky, Duque could see the main force of the night elves moving toward Mount Hyjal. Their blue-purple figures were easy to recognize. Behind them, the waves of destruction were still far behind them, seemingly chasing them closely. Tyrande suddenly became nervous. She asked Duque, "My compatriots, will they escape?" Duque looked at the ground, and the system elf quickly compared the surrounding environment with the geography of 10,000 years in the future. If he didn't make a mistake, this would already be the territory of Du Rotor in the future. Fraud Duque was very sure. It's okay, the disaster won't reach here. Chapter 1072. Duque's words sounded more like some sort of subconscious comfort, but Tyrande believed him without a doubt. Tyrande no longer had any doubts about Duke's abilities as he was able to teleport the two of them back before the Burning Legion's 3 leaders could regain their senses and go on a rampage. If Duque said it was fine, then it was fine. Her heart, which had just started to waver, quickly calmed down. Mount Hyjal was getting closer and closer. As another base of the Night Elves' nature faction, Tyrande felt reassured every time she came to Mount Hyjal. Suddenly, Tyrande heard the goddess's voice. "My child, you've worked hard. Can I trouble you to persuade your companion to come to Mount Hyjal?" Tyrande hesitated when she heard this. She had heard from Malfurion about a few mysterious powerhouses. Including Du Kong beside him, there were a total of 3 humans. These were humans who were completely different from the humans of Kalimdor. They were powerful, mysterious, proficient in all kinds of spells, and had battle techniques that even the best night elf thieves could not master. No one knew where they came from. When they were dealing with the Burning Legion, they obviously had a common goal and naturally formed an alliance. But what about after that? Goddess Elune is looking for you? Duque suddenly asked Tyrande after sensing the goddess's power. "Yes, if you don't mind, the goddess hopes that you can go to Mount Hyjal." Tyrant asked carefully. In her days she seemed to have become that helpless slave girl again. Duque laughed. Heh. Just nice. I also have something to ask Goddess Elune for help. Since both sides had the same wish, it was easy. Tyrant heaved a sigh of relief and continued to sit behind Duque. She hugged Duque's waist and pressed her Mount Hyjal against Duque's back, just like she had done in those days when she needed comfort the most. Unbeknownst to Tyrant, a few hundred meters behind her, a pair of brothers were staring at her from atop two dragons. Illidan shouted in his heart. No, it can't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Parent is mine. At the very least she would be Malfurion's. How could a jerk suddenly appear and take her away? These voices lingered in Illidan's mind, telling him of the unimaginable. Yes, there was a time when he was jealous of his brother, but he couldn't imagine doing anything that would hurt Malfurion, such as cutting off his left arm. But at such a time he could not control his thoughts, and felt that this unthinkable thought of his was somehow a comfort to him. If the one who stole Tyrant was her brother, at least the pain of losing her would be slightly alleviated. Deep in his heart, Illidan still hoped that Tyrant would turn back and abandon the human spy who had once served Kil'jaeden. Perhaps there was still a glimmer of hope. Given time, Tyrant would realize that the two of them were more outstanding than the infernal affairs, and he was more outstanding than his elder brother. Perhaps to many couples, Tyrant's current actions were undoubtedly the greatest betrayal of their feelings. Perhaps many men would turn their love into hate because of this. But at this moment, Illidan, who was wearing a green turban, and his elder brother, Malfurion, who was wearing the traditional green hat of the Druids, looked at each other and saw that they did not regret their choice. Of course he chose to forgive her. Yes. As childhood sweethearts, this was an inevitable choice. However, compared to his elder brother who was prepared to do nothing, Illidan had a more radical approach. He secretly pinched his chest, where there were a few bottles of well water from the Well of Eternity. This was not the water that flowed into the magic vein and was diluted by the river water. This was the purest well water from the forbidden palace of Azhara. If I do something like this, Tyrant will definitely look at me differently, Illidan silently told himself. Dragons were the fastest flying creatures in this era. Not long after, the 4 dragon kings arrived at the peak of Mount Hyjal. It was only when the magnificent temple of the Moon Lady entered her vision that Tyrant realized that she had returned to her own life. That's right. Unless the goddess changed her mind, she would once again become the beautiful high priestess of the temple of the Moon Lady that countless people looked up to and worshipped. Tyrant, high priestess. Tyrant could already hear the cheers of the Elune sisters below. She awkwardly shifted to keep her distance from Duque and waved to the sisters. As they got closer and closer to the ground, Tyrant subconsciously felt a little timid. She had no idea how to tell her sisters about her experiences over the past few days. She did not know what the goddess of Elune had told her sisters, but it seemed that the sisters did not have a bad impression of her because she had been captured by the demons. Instead, their eyes were filled with fanatical worship. Tyrant did not have time to ask because after she and Duque were put down, the 4 dragon kings quickly transformed into their human forms. They urgently needed a meeting to understand the situation of the Burning Legion. Alexstrasza walked at the front, followed by the 3 dragon kings, Duque, and finally Tyrant, Ronan, and the other transmigrators who walked behind Duque. Many ancient dragons also turned into human forms and guarded the perimeter of the Temple of the Moon Lady, preventing anyone from getting close. It was originally still daytime. The moment Elune's will descended, the sky above the central hall of the Moon God Temple turned from day to night. As the bright moonlight filled the entire hall, Duque could feel the will of the goddess turning into a large ball of gentle light that enveloped him. Hello. Expert from another world, may I ask what name I should use to address you? Infernal Affairs? Or Mr. Dukong? Elune's voice was gentle, and it was easy to associate her with the role of a mother. Duque bowed and replied respectfully, a name is just a code. We have our own difficulties that we cannot tell you our real names, please forgive us. So if possible, please call me by my fake name, Dukong. Alright, Dukong. First of all, thank you and your friends for choosing the side of Azeroth in this war. We thank you on behalf of the billions of lives in Azeroth. An illusory white humanoid woman covered in white light appeared, looking like a marshmallow. but there was no doubt that it contained Elun's will. Elun bowed to Duque. Not only her but the 4 dragon kings including Alexstrasza, also bowed to Duque. Chapter 1073. This. Ronan was a little incoherent, Krasis was extremely excited, and even Lord Howell was a little embarrassed. Vanessa quietly took a step to the left and hid behind Duque, deliberately letting all the glory fall on Duque. Only Duque, the one and only Duque in the world, calmly accepted all of this under Tyron's surprised gaze. Duque did not think that there was anything wrong with this. After all, in the game he was the man who had killed the true god Thun and held the chicken drumstick Atish. This was a habit that transmigrators naturally developed, and when faced with a grand occasion, it seemed more imposing and imposing. This was a gift from a true god and 4 demigods. Tyron covered her mouth in shock. Duque did not know that because of his unintentional action, Elun and the 4 dragon kings had a higher opinion of Duque. After all, if Duque was the kind of person who relied purely on scheming to ruin the Burning Legion, he would not be worthy of their heartfelt respect. But if he was a true hero who dared to bet his life and soul, fight for the world, and suffer all kinds of humiliation to finally drive away the enemy, it was a completely different matter. An existence with this kind of spirit was worthy of being worshipped by everyone no matter where they went. Elun admired Duque very much. After letting out a light breath, she said in a very calm tone, "The other beings in the world of Azeroth and I would like to know what happened in the Twisted Nether. My child Tyron will not hide anything from me. But we would like to know the process from your point of view." Duque tilted his head slightly. "Let me be clear. I am referring to you letting go of part of your spiritual world and not just repeating it verbally. We have no intention of prying into your privacy, and we also know that this is very rude. In exchange, you can also state your request in advance, and we will do our best to satisfy you." Alexstrasza also chimed in. "Please do not treat this as a transaction. As a token of appreciation for your help in Azeroth, we have prepared a big gift for you. Let me stress that this is a friendly exchange. It's just that if you're willing to show us your memories, we'll give you more generous gifts. If you agree, we can give you as much as we can." As soon as she finished speaking, the 4 dragon kings took out the gifts they had secretly prepared and placed them on their palms. Every item was priceless. There were equipment and tools. For example, the Red Dragon Queen pulled out a translucent, illusory list for Duque to choose from. "I agree," Duque replied. "But before that, I would like to change my request to everyone." The moonlight avatar of Elun made a "please" gesture. "Lady Alexstrasza, I want your life blessing. Bestow upon the 5 of us that we can control with our own will and possess powerful regenerative abilities." "Sure." "Master Maligos, I want copies of all the magic manuscripts of the 5 elements: fire, frost, arcane, light, and darkness." "Yes." "Sir Isra, I want to construct the principles and tactics of the dream world." "No problem." "Sir Nosdormu, I want to..." At this point, Duque suddenly switched to the Draconic language, which was even more ancient. This shocked everyone present. Nosdormu nodded. "Lastly, Goddess Elun. My request will be made after I show you my memories." With that, Duque opened up his mind and showed Elun and the 4 dragon kings what he had seen and heard in Azeroth 10,000 years ago. However, Duque cleverly divided his mind into layers. He only showed them what they wanted to know on the outermost layer. Everything that involved his privacy was blurry and dark. There wasn't even any sound. Tyrant, who was standing behind Duke, had also entered the dreamscape that Isra had created for her. She watched the video and her heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally calmed down. If even the bits and pieces of that ridiculous period were shown without reservation, it would be a shameful play and the cruelest public execution. If this was shown, Tyron would probably have no choice but to commit suicide. Duque's display also made the few big shots in Azeroth smile bitterly. They began to understand why Duque could actually hide from those demons who were good at playing with people's hearts and prying into their souls. Of course, they understood what they wanted to know, but they didn't miss out on anything else. In order to trick the Burning Legion, Elun did not hesitate to lose a high priest. Now it seemed that Elun had profited greatly from this matter. Of course, the temporary death of her husband Malorn was another matter. In the dream world outside of Duque's perception, Elun, the 4 dragon kings and the demigod Cenarius, who had not made it back in time, were having a small meeting. Can it be trusted? Malygos asked impatiently. Among so many big shots, he was the one who suffered the most. Not only did he hate Nesario, but he also hated the Burning Legion. At this point in time, he was already so paranoid that he was going crazy. When he had the time to go find his recently dead wife, Syndagosa, and touch her resentment, he should have fallen into madness just like in history. 5 billion demons. 450 void lords. Such an exaggerated battle record, I almost thought it was fake. Nozdormu smiled bitterly. Duque's system elf's detection was the best in terms of the living, but in terms of detecting spirits, it was inferior to these gods and demigods. He also didn't know that he had done such an exaggerated job. Hehe. Did you guys sense Sardraz's unwilling will wandering outside the planet's space barrier? Alexstrasza laughed. It's true. Elun made the final decision, and the other demigods no longer had any objections. After leaving the Dream World conference room, Elun immediately announced the results. Not to mention Ronan and the others, even Duque was dumbfounded when he heard this number. That much. Isra, who had his eyes closed, broadcast the voice of the soul that was wandering in outer space. It was President Sardraz's roar. Infernal affairs. You bastard. I won't let you go. Don't let me catch you. The boring threat behind was cut off by Isra. Isra smiled. How is it? Mr. Dukong, do you need protection? Azeroth welcomes you. Elun let out a long sigh of relief. Such a huge loss, the Burning Legion will not dare to come for at least 10,000 years. Well done, Mr. Dukong. Please tell me how you want me to reward you. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.